Have we turned it up for 9?
I haven't touched
Have we
it.
asked anybody?
Alright,
We are live.
alright, I'll take a motion to reconvene in public session. Julie, seconded by Brad, all those in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, we'll move first to approval of the minutes. They have a motion to approve the following minutes of the special meetings held on June 18th, 2024, and the budget meeting held on July 17th, 2024. Dennis is, excuse me, Dennis, seconded by Katie, all those in favor. Any opposed? It's me, I'm abstaining. Okay, so this says I wasn't present for the 2 minutes. Okay, so everyone is present, is a yes, and you're in. Now we're moving on to preliminary discussion and possible action on fiscal year 25 budget, which will include our BOE pre-budget topics, timeline, and preliminary costs. Turn it to you, Dr. Hadley. I know Rich and Shirley and Dean and Marge.
All right, so this memo actually. This memo sort of summarizes where we ended up with for big budget drivers for FY25. And then basically we go add a potential budget initiative for FY26. None of these we have discussed along the way. We also included in this memo a timeline where we may discuss those particular items in different forms of the curriculum committee.
fields that we're looking at, which is professional development, building capacity, looking at some of the other tiers, we will not be waiting until June to share that information. That will be sometime early on, prior, if it has a budget consideration.
So it's just a follow-up question, just on the PPTs specifically, because I think there had been questions from people about the number of people and the number of administrators that are required or that are attending all of the PPT meetings. And is there flexibility in that? Do we have more that are attending than we really need to, and comparisons to districts? And I guess I was hoping that perhaps we could have some of that data earlier than later so that we could potentially free up some admin time, or you just with, and I don't know the regulations, I don't know what's required. And also people had been mentioning the frequency or the number of PPTs that we are holding versus what is required. And is there flexibility in that? And I guess those were just questions that I thought we might be able to get shorter term than by next June, but just from a standpoint of looking at budgets and everything else. But I don't know the details, so.
So actually, those are fairly easy questions to answer, okay? Because the responsibility in terms of regulation is there needs to be an administrator at a PPT. So there is a building-based administrator who's there because they're informed, they understand the building, and they can do that. So that's a requirement. So it's one administrator. Are there times where there may be more than one administrator? I may be attending a meeting, Scott may be, but it's only one building administrator that is required. So that won't change. There's no variability in that.
Right. I guess I'm not talking just about the building administrator. I think my understanding was that sometimes, and this is from parents telling me that there are, 10 people in a PPT and wondering, is that really needed? Because that's drawing out a lot of pretty senior level people. And I don't know, that was feedback that I had heard over the past 12 months that I just was curious.
I was one of those parents.
So just to give information for that, and again, I can't speak specifically,
Right.
nor would I to respond to a single family or parent. Members of the PPT are invited based on the discussion and based on the evaluations of the information that's being discussed. So you may be at a PPT. The required members, just so you're required, are the building administrator, a special education teacher, a general education teacher, any other providers that students may have. They may have an SLP, they may have an OTPT, so anyone who provides services. A parent has the option to excuse some of those members if they wish to, but those are our required invitees and attendees to invite. In addition, but you can,
Okay.
and there will be PPTs where there are maybe 5 members. We also invite our school psychologists to be there because that's an important part of our consideration. But again, they can be excused as the parent request.
So just for this particular thing, right? We're not looking at this to be necessarily for the budget. However, the idea, like, how is the system principal model going? There's a lot of investment in that. So to come back to the table to discuss that is a reasonable thing to do. Not necessarily for the budget process, but it doesn't preclude us looking for efficiencies in all the areas, including special education for the upcoming budget. So that's not going to preclude anything from the budget process, but this particular, if it's not the board's way to do that, then you can let me know. I'm thinking that something like this, it would be, it's what the board's looking for. So we would do this. It'll run concurrently, but not necessarily in alignment with the budget timeline or specifically for the budget. But it doesn't preclude efficiencies coming from any area in the budget.
So this is, to summarize, this is a larger group of work than the next 6 months. There could be some preliminary conclusions in the next 3 or 4, possibly. So I think we would need to understand, probably in a subsequent conversation, what a more a robust timeline would look like. That I think, Rob.
One other question, and I'm just looking again now at this, the first page of, the 4.64% excluding anything with special education. And then the paragraph down below that said that if you include a potential increase of the out-of-district tuition, that would get you to 5%. Then when I look at the next page, there are 2 state mandates that we also have, which are the K-3 literacy initiative and play-based learning, which would add an additional 0.58% increase to our budget. for next year, and this is without any additional initiatives. So that would potentially get you to 5.58% increase before we have any other costs, which gets to my question about Board of Finance guidance and looking at the past 5 years as an example. And I mean, just seeing the cost pressures that we already have without anything new, much less the other strategic priorities and budgetary initiatives that we have on the next 2 pages. So again, I'm
So-
just worried about how
Let's-
we can make this happen without really cutting student programs if the guidance potentially is going to go at the, 3 to 4% rate.
I don't think we know what guidance is going to be next year at this stage, so I don't know that we want to spend
But
any
this
time.
is helpful.
So
And-
yes,
and
yes.
It's really helpful.
So let's,
to
but
see
let's
this.
back up and yes, to your point, let's back up and start from the beginning. And I don't know if that's Rich or you, Alan, and go back through it, because I agree, looking at the hill we're climbing is important. Oh, yes, yes, go ahead, Katie.
Thank you, Shirley. Thank you so much for that overview. That's fantastic to hear. I so appreciate the way you're thinking about that comprehensively, the way that you are pulling together the multi-different tiers, the way that they're addressed. So I'm really looking forward to your update and review this fall. A couple of things I just wanted to comment on that. I think that, like, Robin, to your initial question about that impact this coming budget, there are things in that, right? Like just bringing the contracted providers that we approved in this past budget will affect, what our operating budget is this year and what we'll plan for the next year. So that's great to recognize and look at. It's great to hear that you're talking about the assessments, and also that I appreciate that you're calling out the ones that are beyond the scope of the educational system. Those are important things for us to remember as well, that, it's not a matter of bringing it in-house, it's just outside that. I do want to say, in terms of the administrative workload, that I am really grateful to hear that as we are adding cost drivers, not just on a single year, but year over year, that we are looking to say, how did this work? Is this going to be worth it? Is it do what we wanted? So I very much appreciate your participation in that. I think, however, that, the conversation around PPTs, which does lead to the budget further, it's not just about administrative workload, right? Like, yes, there are administrators in those PPTs, but there are classroom teachers, there are special education teachers, there are service providers. So we really need to be thinking about, what is the cost of every PPT, for the meeting as a whole, not just for the administrators. And that might also lead us to a bigger and longer conversation that's maybe not directly tied to the budget, but will have implications on, how are our processes and our protocols and our communications communicated, right? Do parents know how many people to expect, and do they know, when and how to excuse them? And I think that it would be really helpful to understand in the update, what are the frequency and the durations, and not just an average, but really a high and low. We know what the legal requirements are, but what are we seeing in practice? So I'm really excited about all the things that you said in terms of what you're looking at, and also what you're committed to delivering. And I think that that kind of exploration of what's going on, we can start to realize more efficiency. Thanks for that.
Okay. Back to the beginning, Rich.
Just go through it? Sure. So as with every year, the bulk of what we spend, our resources are on are people. So if you look at that first chart, over 4% of that increase is people, whether it's collective bargaining agreements for certified and non-certified staff. Health insurance, while health insurance will take a while to settle in, we are trying to work on a rate cap, which would not exceed 11%. If you recall this past year, that was 14%. But it will be a sizable increase in our claims. We do have non-personnel contracts, whether it's transportation or software or the lease at Fitch, and then some smaller facility items like garbage contracts and elevator contracts, things like that. The last demography report did forecast an additional section in elementary schools to be 109, and then there were some items that were deferred in this current year's budget, including athletic uniforms and technology. So that does get you to a little over 4.5%, and that does exclude, as we mentioned earlier, anything related to special education. The two primary non-personnel drivers within special education are usually tuition evaluations and contracted services. It's unlikely that they would be zero, but it's too early certainly to tell what they will be. It'll depend on what happens with PPT process, a number of other things in terms of service. We did mention at previous meetings, some potential budgetary initiatives with some preliminary costs. And a K-3 literacy initiative, in excess of $500,000. Smaller level EduPlanet expansion and play-based learning, professional learning for staff. We had talked about doing a facility study primarily for middle school, Tokenique and the high school, because those are the three buildings left essentially being untouched right now. That would be a $200,000 increase as well. And then looking at maybe redoing the website, potential transition programming for students who are 18-22, and depending on the staff and the location, that cost can range anywhere between $1 million and $2 million. And then a change in a student information system, which would be a multi-expense. So that $300,000 is just the first year expense, and then there would be further expenditures down the road associated with that. So that does get you, if you were to do obviously everything, between 6.75% and 7.5%. Especially.
Questions? I know I have a couple. Julie?
A couple, excuse me, for K-3 literacy and also transition programming. I was curious if there are any offsets that we could anticipate with those newer incremental investments. Is there anything that we're not spending?
For transition programming, it would depend on if you could bring that student back. It's unlikely you would experience that in the first year.
Okay.
It certainly wouldn't be enough to cover the full cost associated with that. And then in terms of K-3 literacy, no.
And then also, sorry.
Just to add to that, Julie, what we would be able to look at is what the sending the student outside of our transition program would cost. Again, to Rich's point, you won't see it the first year, but what that expense would have cost
What
to
we
send
don't
out.
spend, right.
So we can see that.
Thank you.
Yeah, because the actual investment, well, technically those dollars would go out, there is an offset, so.
So it would be a partial offset. So we do have some students in places outside of Darien.
Yeah.
The amount of students that we have are certainly not near $2 million.
Sure.
But again, you can't force them to come back into the district. And so you have that initial outlay plus the cost of the student going to that other location. And then over time, maybe you could recoup some of the dollars, but not all.
How much of this expense is capital versus operation? Do we
It's
know?
all operating.
It's all operating.
Right.
And that's annual, correct? That's a per year operating
With the exception of the student information system, it is a gargantuan task to do. So you would have about $300,000 in expenses for contracted services and software. You would have to run both systems parallel. And then in the next year, you would have to send both university. And then eventually Aspen would drop off, but it is a more expensive system. But that is not, 300,000 isn't bad.
I was also asking about the transition programming. That's an increase
So
in operating expense
It
as
is.
well,
So it's
correct?
it would be the
Annual.
cost of staff. And then likely like Fitch, you would rent a facility somewhere in town. And so that.
So just one thing that would be helpful as we look at this. So for the transition programming, you're saying the number of students we have now, what that contracted cost is and what that would be, at least if we can forecast that a few years out, is it? What would we predict that we would be spending if we continue to do what we're doing now versus taking this in-house, doing a 1 to 2 additional cost per year to have an in-house program? And that was some of the discussion that we had when it was presented initially, that would be really helpful to have as a further analysis of the cost benefit of either of those options. Because it's just a large kind of number, just given the other constraints we're facing right now.
I think for each of the items on the whole list, it'd be helpful to know just like what's a recurring cost versus what's one time and done. Or big cost up front with trickling afterwards.
Did you say, Rich, that they're not all recurring, right? Because the student information system, and the website redesign are not.
Those would not be recurring in the facilities that we would not.
Got it. Okay, so we'll just mark that.
Yeah, I agree that level of, that would be really helpful for context, what we're spending now versus what we're looking to do. And additionally, do you happen to know, Rich, off the top of your head, what the current annual transition costs are?
don't know off the top of
Okay,
my
that's
head.
okay. What about a comparable for the capital part? Recognizing like if we're renting Fitch, can you just remind us the ballpark?
So for Fitch, we spend a little over $150,000 a year in rent. I don't believe we actually have an expense of our school, so I would imagine if you wanted to have house within the school, you're talking about an addition to some school. Depending on the square feet, and that's, you know, a few $1 million. So it'll probably be over 10 years. For you.
And then surely, again, with the capital space, I remember in the presentation that we had this spring, that had some indicators of like what comparable spaces were. I'm assuming that that would require some sort of build out, right? That we're not just going to be renting a space that's like ready to go.
And it's in Rich's calculation. It might be a space that's ready to go. This in town, there's a lot of town.
Okay.
That might be the advantage of being in town is for job opportunities for students.
Okay.
So there is a good advantage to the build up area in town.
Okay, so that's just determined. Or,
So
okay.
typically, if it's like an office complex like Fitch, the landlord will provide that kind of like construction build out like they did for Fitch. I mean, granted, they'll take that cost and build it into your rent over time. But it's a place like that, typically they would do that.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Questions?
Robin's point about K-3 literacy and play-based learning, these are unfunded mandates, so we don't have an option to not do them, do we? So shouldn't those be rolled into the upper part? And now we're talking 5.2% increase versus a 4.6. Just baseline?
Not have an option to not do those. And I would also add that they're the right things to do for children. To go back to that earlier comment, we want to ensure that we have very strong outcomes for our children with regard to literacy K-3, because that's one of the most significant indicators for post-secondary success and into adulthood for our young people. And we've had conversations about play-based learning and how important that is developmentally. What we can control will be timeline of that work. And so something to think about is not only the cost for the materials, for example, like buying, for example, literacy or equipment and materials for play-based learning, the added cost of revising curriculum, the added cost of professional learning. And then just when we think about workload and capacity for staff, you know, what our staff can do, you know, all in 1 year from the teacher's perspective, you'd want to make sure that we timeline that out very carefully. So we could adjust here some of these numbers based on, you know, if we wanted to start with K1, you know, from a literacy perspective, we could then go into 2-3. We don't have to do everything all in 1 year. And with regard to play-based learning, as a reminder, that goes up through 5th grade. We will start only with ELP and kindergarten.
And that is this number of,
That is that number.
Meaning just kindergarten? or
No,
K
ELP
through-
So-
and
but the 50,000 is just,
right.
Oh,
It's like 30 classrooms.
and then do I take that as, that's $25,000 per grade? So as we progress up, it's an extra 25K or no?
No. Would less likely be lesser costs actually as you move up. And I would also say that with regard to what is happening, the ELP is pretty well laid out. So that number may come in actually less at the end of the day, but it's roughly 30 classrooms that we're talking about. A little over $1,000 a classroom.
On this, oh, Julie, do you have a question? I just
For the year.
quick one, because I know we're not trying to vet all these ideas or initiatives right now. The status on the 2-hour PLC late openings once a week? I feel like I missed a conversation. Where are we in that discussion?
We haven't done any.
We haven't started it.
I mean, we're just putting out that, the idea of professional learning for staff is something that I'd like to support. And whether it materializes in that idea or not, I'm not saying that that's the solution. We're going to look at the professional learning time for our staff and how we might provide the necessary time for them to do the work, right? So that's a placeholder at the moment, and until we actually Put on the wagons and do the next one. Dump.
Okay, so that's likely based on per student won't look like that. Won't look like an appeal, a 2-hour delay.
Once a week.
Likely won't. I won't say likely won't. I won't.
I just don't understand how to read that box, because it says this is what we're proposing, but first you, but so just interpret it for me, please.
Bus drivers don't work a full day,
Right,
right? So they only get paid for doing a block in the morning and then a block in the afternoon. Most of the drivers work other jobs in the middle of the day. Some of them are DoorDash drivers, Uber Eats, grocery stores, that. So at a 2-hour late opening, you don't have necessarily the drivers to make it work. And so similar to like our custodian contract, their contract allows them to call them in other related events, So their ability to staff the buses right now is.
okay, so it's likely to look very differently, but you're marking. This is an initiative you're interested in, we just don't know what form it takes.
Correct, yep.
And the existing PLC delayed openings that we do have at the high school, that's already in the budget. They can
Yes,
staff
that-
that,
yes,
and this
that's
would just
fine.
be additive, right?
Yes,
Okay,
that's
okay.
all.
So Rich, is there a chance then that there would be an additional cost to this potential initiative because of the first student?
So they would have to bargain it with their union.
And that's not something that you would be able to estimate until it went to
Until they
that?
do that, yeah. I mean, it was extraordinarily difficult for them to do. Caused a lot of angst amongst their drivers, so doing it once a week.
So the 219 is just for the professional development. It's got nothing.
It's primarily for busing, yes.
So yeah,
Oh, it is
it would
for
be busing costs. It's effectively 1/3 of the daily rate of a bus. So that's kind of what we're earmarking it at, whether it ends up being that or more or less.
So the 219 represents the estimate
The cost for the
for,
bus.
okay.
Cost.
All right, one more clarification. Are we talking DHS only, or are we talking all schools in this?
That scenario would be for the high school.
This is high school.
I think that's just the high school quote, right? I'm just flagging that I'm gonna be looking at professional learning for staff. That's really what it.
How do you make up for the missed classroom instruction time?
Well, I would honestly not want to get into that discussion right now, to be honest. It's not, I'm not avoiding, well, I am avoiding it because it's part of the whole, it would be part of a whole presentation of you're reducing now the time of.
That will be a consideration. that you
Of
bring
course,
to us.
yes.
Okay, is everybody in reasonable agreement about the timeline of things being presented?
The transition programming, I'm just wondering if we could get that in an earlier timeline, since November 26th, to have that presentation so close to the budget, that it would be ideal if we could maybe get some of these numbers we're talking about, or a cost, what are our existing costs projected at versus doing
Yeah.
this? It's such a large item. I think it would be very helpful if we could get that earlier.
I think not maybe not the whole presentation, but I think a follow-up on some of the basic finances subsequent to this meeting would be helpful. So Rich and Shirley, you guys can get us probably just at least a quick back of the envelope forecast, offsetting costs for this first year. So like.
So I don't think there would be any offsetting costs in the first year. It would be an LP.
But you know that you have some, well, we don't know. If we have a student, at least one. then
So we would know what the cost is for those students.
That's what I
Again,
mean.
You can't bank on that student back, so it's likely that the offsetting cost would be like your.
Rich, I think what Jill was mentioned was for a student going to be going out, so we recommend a program for students go out to a program in 25, 26, we can offset it with that cost of student coming to our program.
Yes,
We would know who.
thank you. Robin?
I just wanted to clarify, what I was looking for is if we just keep status quo and we have an idea how many students might need this,
Okay,
what would it cost if we just did status quo and contracting it out versus this cost of the $1.1 to $2 million additional cost to build it?
Okay.
That's really my question.
May I just add to that, Jill, just one thing to Robin's question and what Rich and I can work on. So in our presentation to the board, we showed the timeline of how many students we have and what the aging out process looked like.
Yeah.
So what we can do, not all students go into our program because there are different students.
Right.
So what we can look at is the cost over the years we had that of how many students are aging out, approximately how many students would be, want to attend our program and appropriate for our program, and how many students might still need to go out to the program
Okay.
based on their individual needs. We can do that.
Just to evaluate.
Yes.
One versus the other
Yes.
option. That would be really helpful.
Yes. Verifying that.
Jill, I had a
Yes.
Thank you. On the Aspen to Power School item, just to kind of go back to the conversation we were having earlier about making sure that we understand who this benefits, how it benefits them. I think that's one that we're going to have to get, I mean, that's a big number. Really understand who's winning if we spend that money and how it improves things, how it improves student outcomes, how it improves community experience, et cetera. So I think we have to look at that critically and frame it up pretty comprehensively to consider that when we get there.
That is absolutely correct. And we haven't crossed that bridge yet.
That's planned for December. Okay. A related question I have when we're talking about student information, talk more about metrics. I'd like to be sure, Rich, that we're thinking about the universe of analytics, what we need. So when we talk about the student information system, I'd love to understand what it does not provide. But for example, I'm pretty sure that CT says doesn't have a very robust analytical capability. I'm guessing, but pretty sure. I understand that the state requires it. I don't know that Aspen or that any other student information system comes with a database. I don't know that it integrates and then has. So it would just be helpful to understand where there are gaps in our overall process, what this does solve and what it doesn't, as part of a bigger back office IT solution. Greg.
Yeah, on the timeline, I'm just thinking about, these are all initiatives related to the 2026 budget, and that budget process will be happening at the end of this year, right?
Technically the beginning of January, but we get it for Christmas.
So just in terms of like, these are all falling on different Board of Ed meeting dates. I think like understanding comprehensively all of them versus doing one at a time, then by the end, like we may be at that spot, or we may think that we're not in the right spot. So I think comprehensively we should do it. Or just rethink this timeline to expedite a little bit so that we have more information ahead of that budget process so that we can build it into the budget.
Okay.
And actually have some thoughts in advance.
That's a good suggestion. And some of these may actually fall off, never, right? So.
Okay. All right, so you guys will go back and look at that calendar. Thank you.
Katie, just to add to that, I think that it would be helpful to keep that concept of priorities in mind as well. So, Alan, even as you're presenting things to us, it's always helpful to have, kind of, I think we talked about this, something past about the tiers, right? Of like, if I could do everything, I would do all of these. I had to, kind of rank them. I do.
Robin.
I mean, just that gets back to my first question, which is the mandated items, the K through learning. Even if we did a slim back initiative for K through 3 literacy, is that basically half the cost? Or, it would be helpful because I think, again, the mandated things we have to do. And to me, it seems that the total pro forma that's shown on page 1 potentially should include the mandated things that we have to do, because I think it's in our best interest to have the other governmental bodies in town that are giving guidance for budgets to really fully understand the costs earlier on in the fall that we will be facing. And right now, those costs, for instance, on page 2 are not included in that initial page, nor are, at the special ed piece. And, already, again, like I said before, we're at 5.58% increase with no other initiatives at all. We need to have that discussion with the Board of Finance or whoever
Yes.
early in the fall as opposed to in November.
Yeah, so Rich, what's the ideal timeline for this starting point to sort of set out what the priorities would be? But in terms of real forecasting, what's your ideal timeline?
So, I mean, obviously, things change throughout the course of the year. We won't have staffing, really ready until September starts. It takes a couple months really for things to kind of flush out, with special education. So expectations bring a pro forma similar to last year, October. It doesn't mean it won't here or if agreement or a place that occurs, but end of October is probably a good spot. And that's also when we start opening up the budget for the different RCs that start their work.
Okay. Dave has a question. Dave?
Thanks, Jill. Just following up this idea that if we have priorities, it's at 5.8 and Board of Finance comes in at, 2%, and, we need to let them know that we have all the stuff we have to do. And discussion earlier about it's the best interest of the children and the students, of course it is, but it's not unlimited. We're bounded by the decision and the judgment by Board of Finance. So it's good that we forecast this and have this discussion and let them know as early on as possible and work collaboratively with our other governmental bodies. But the reality is, if they give us a number, that's the number. So our priorities are going to change, and we may have things we want to do or things we're ongoing doing, and those have to come out. And we need to, always remain. You always need to remember that perspective that we're under their auspices for what number they want to give us, despite whether we think it's important or not. So, but we're all for the best interest of the students. It's not unlimited.
Thank you. Okay, so Alan, you had this on for a vote.
Just possible action. I wasn't necessarily anticipating a vote on
Okay.
something, to be honest with you. It's under the umbrella of a possible action, just in case the board felt that they would want to take some action on this, but I'm not looking for action. These are, I'm sort of like moving forward as to whether they're going to fall off, stay on, come back.
Okay. Okay, it's not unusual for, it's not always the practice. It's not unusual though for boards to put some stake in the ground around priorities in the fall. So this will probably iterate between now and then, but maybe, we talk about when this comes back in the fall as part of helping set direction. Yeah. Well, we're looking for priorities. So
right,
it might
all
just
right.
be that the
That's
board
what
is in
we're
agreement with these priorities.
All right,
and
okay, yes.
Whether or not the board them is always. So has this first, but yeah.
Just on that point, though, I mean, if we say that we're in agreement with priorities, but from a fiscal standpoint, we're not going to be able to do it. How does that balance each other?
Right. So. Yeah.
Because I think that is the reality that we are in, and I just question, with the amount of staff time that also has to go into fleshing out some of these initiatives. And if we want to have that time spent, if ultimately we know that it's going to be expensive for what we're going to be able to do. I just ask that question.
Yep, go ahead, John.
This is part of the downfall doing some of these early forecasts too, but there's puts and takes. So I don't think we should shy away from priorities based on fears, not fears, wrong word, concerns. We're going to get cut eventually. But we may get cut eventually. I think we should go through our process like we do every year, but also have a collaborative, informative, transparent process with the fiscal authority. So, they're about there. I don't want to have like a mini budget process with priorities. That priorities don't only deal with new initiatives either, they could be other initiatives. A priority.
Yeah, just so on that point, I mean, are there priorities that have been left off this that we didn't consider for one reason or another?
Not currently at the moment, because we've gone through a couple of meetings where does that happen? As many of the things that you think we're going to address or not going to address, or priorities or otherwise. Exactly. I'm not sitting here with another list, at least not another list that is has an expenditure or high expenditure associated with it.
Okay.
I will say that I may think, I don't want to preclude something coming on it because I just don't know what comes across the table. You just never know. Okay, so I would say that disclaimer first, and also if there's something that's cost neutral, it may or may not be on this list.
Katie, just following up on John's point about, looking to make sure that we want to continuously re-up past initiatives. Not that it would be for today, but I do think that would be an interesting exercise for us to kind of go through at a regular interval where, as we're heading into a budget season, we're not just looking forward at what we might be adding, but there is a conscious look at looking backwards to, is everything working? Is everything necessary? Is there a new priority that takes precedent over something we have existing? But making that a conscious exercise would be a good one, I think.
I'm in agreement with that. I think part of the discussion is, this discussion is focused on building. But I think the reality of building in the current economic context is that there will be other things that have to go. And so I think they're not listed here necessarily. I'm not suggesting anything that isn't super well thought out or that would necessarily be damaging. That's not at all what I'm implying, but I am saying that there is a parallel expectation that we are evaluating the efficacy of the initiatives that we have in place, that we are taking a look at insourcing and outsourcing and negotiating contracts and things, that we do part of economization all the time. So I think, thank you for raising the point also, Robin, because we need to remember that there are two sides to that coin. Okay. With that, let's move on to discussion of Board of Education goals and strategic plan goals, strategies, actions for 24-25.
So if I may speak in general terms, just an overview type thing. I'll start just with going to Cassie, if you don't mind, Ms. Philpott, I might just go right to the strategic plan just first for a moment. Right now, I'm going to come back. Go to the goal area 1. So this is a little bit of a change, first of all, in format. I just want to let you know what you're looking at. We didn't have key performance indicators before. So I picked that up here at the board table that you would like that, metrics or key performance indicators. And it was just, we changed the word on the right-hand side as now evidence. So what basically we did, we said, okay, for goal area 1, increase in teaching and learning, that we would have a performance indicator. The wording of the performance indicator is not specific enough. All right, so I'll just share that with you. But I want your general feed on is the general approach something that you would like to do. So you have goal area 1s and teaching and learning. You will see there's new words that come up. I thought they were color, maybe they weren't. Okay, but they aren't color. You just can't see. So we went through the strategic plan. If something's brand new, it says it. If something has been revised or modified, it says it. Right? If something has been completely deleted, then we were very transparent about saying it's deleted. If something's completed, we've removed it because it was 2023, 2024. So we're now looking at the last 2 remaining years. So for instance, in goal area 1, you'll see the actions. None of the strategies have changed, except for one of it was already completed. It's just the actions that have been sort of updated and some of the evidence. So we put in here, for instance, this key performance indicator. That whole area, right, under teaching and learning, we would identify, I've suggested here 3, which is a key indicator of student success. 5 and 8, because that's the end of the school year, right? The actual schooling of the elementary schools and the middle school, and then grade 11. And we could also, to some degree, roll out grade 12 there too. So I would be coming back with indicators around 3, 5, 8, and 11 that we would look at that for that broad goal of enhancing teaching and learning. It would look at some subgroups like special education, right? Or the growth of our students, like the growth that we want them to, right? So I'm trying to give you a wee model of kind of what I would be thinking about and to see if, are we on the right page with this? Are we in agreement with it? Does any of the board members want to work with us on it, or are we moving in the right direction? I'm not saying that the key performance indicators for all of the rest of the areas that I have here, 2, 3, 4, the rest of the goal areas are perfect, okay? I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just giving you a format of what you're looking at to start with, and key performance indicators are new. What did we have instead of evidence?
Measurement.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Measures.
Measurement. So we changed that just because it's a wee bit different than the metric. So that's the way we have structured it. I'll just go to goal area 2 real quick. Just go to goal area 2 real quick. So we would take the key indicators from the school climate survey that you heard about today from Tom. We would select probably these main bucket areas. We could do something different, but we'd have to sort of articulate it. What are we looking for, right? What are we looking for? Increases or improvements? And but if you think we're in the right lines here, in the right direction, this is kind of the direction we're going to go. If you go back to the board goals, right, just sort of same things. Ms. Fulham, would you go back to the board goals, please? Right, so for the first goal, it was about key indicator of having metrics. So the board still it's up to the board. We haven't changed these goals per se. We did change measurement. We did change a key performance indicator. We thought you might want that too. If you don't, that's okay. We'll go back to the other strategy. So for goal area 1, we used the evidence of a data dashboard of some description. We have teaching and learning goal 2 for the board. So we would replicate the key indicator for goal area 2 that's in the strategic plan, and then we would put that also for goal area 2 at the board goals. So you'll see that's the format. I'm open for discussion, whether you think we're heading in the right direction, whether you like the key indicator performers, or I know they have to be detailed more. Be like set an expectation what it is. That's fine. I'll stop talking a little bit. Is that enough to sort of get a framework to look at it, first of all?
Yes.
The data dashboard live?
Typically, a data dashboard would live on the district website. You'd be very open about this. You'd be very transparent about it. I'll tell you this, I need to know somebody has the skills. I did do it. But anyway, it would live on, it would be a real document living on with performance, a real document living on the website under the Board of Education or under the.
So are we, at this point, you ready to go through goal by goal? Is that what we're doing?
Well, I think we probably should at least.
Boards for sure. Okay.
The one thing for me is I personally don't love the deleted and memorialize those somehow, and whether we can. I don't like color red because that's not completed, but we can put it in a different way. I think it's important to have what we've accomplished in this. Show that we've accomplished something, I guess, opposed to just delete.
I hear that. I'll just say in the past, we have gone through the process of moving stuff if it has been completed. So I'm just saying we've done that before, Dennis. And
I understand. I think it's important to try to memorialize what we've done. When you look at this document, you see maybe, and I'm not asking to do more work to bring things back that we've accomplished already. But in the work that's here, you've now deleted, maybe it's realize that moving forward.
the only thing I say that we have done though, on the website, you get the current version and get the previous versions of the strategic plan. We haven't deleted everything. Do you know what I mean? So if you go to the website, you'll see the original version, then you'll see last year's version. So we've tried to keep some,
You've almost moved to a model where you have a 5-year plan and then it has a yearly plan underneath it for each of the 5 years.
yes, so I think the first one, second year was not there.
Robin,
I just think it would be helpful, maybe it's just as simple as saying, but for the half year, final, what did we accomplish? When things are rolling off, that's basically one of the milestones, the accomplishments that achieved a goal of our strategic plan. It's like the list of, not only like, how did the students do, which you gave us list of, across many different areas, how they did. This would kind of apply to our strategic goal, our strategic plan, how we accomplished the different goals that were laid out. And it's like, completed PDEC thing, completed 100% of EduPlanet being curriculum. And these would, over the course of the year, be in this kind of status
Correct.
update. But at the point where it's actually done, it would be great if somebody could just keep a list of that. Okay, this was completed, so we can kind of keep track of actually what did we accomplish at the end of the
The only
year.
other area that exists is whenever we did it at the end of the year and we give you the update as to has it been completed, has it not been?
That's what I'm
completed.
saying.
So that exists, that the documentation of that does.
As
he's
part of
talking
the,
about the quarterly update that we get.
or a quarterly
I
update.
think we probably, we've talked about this before. I think the quarterly update is sort of a problem because it doesn't directly follow this format. And so we are having a hard time tying back that quarterly update to what was originally laid out. So I do think if we're going to move to this model, we need to close it out. Because that's part of the problem. We have to be able to see, and right now we have a document, we have a lot of documents. We have, kind of the plan that started the year, then we have update 1, update 2, and update 3, and all 3 are slightly different from one another. So I think, it depends on the level of detail you want in the strat plan. If you want the strat plan to be pretty high level, then you would keep it, I think, at a 5-year. If you want this level of what's actually happening in the coming year, I think if we got to 5 years that all in the same document, it'd be pretty big. So, are you looking for a 5-year look out at this level of detail?
Personally, no. But I do think we have to memorialize, to Robin's point, I think it's good to have some, maybe we need another document then of accomplishments. But to me, I don't, it's, I understand it's work, but it's also work to go back and read 5 years of documents and compare and see what you've done and what you haven't done. So.
Yeah, I think the way that we report in quarterly has to be changed. It's just, it doesn't match how we're outlining the work.
I'm happy to consider any and all recommended. We can go back and actually do stuff. Without too much, we can go back and get some of what we've accomplished and memorialize that and keep that.
But again, this is one person's opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know what the others feel.
Go ahead, Julie.
Sorry, I don't know. Jill, can you talk a little more about what you're saying about the quarterlies don't match how we're?
So what we're getting is a quarterly report that kind of has the high level and then just lists a bunch of things. We're not getting a quarterly report that shows, directly.
Ties back to that.
Yes,
Okay.
so I think it would be helpful to stay with this format, this list of action steps. If there's one added, fine, add them. But, really what we're just doing is filling out evidence as it develops during the year. And so I personally, I think that probably the quarterly or tri-annual update needs to be this document with the evidence filled in. So that every time you're looking at the document, it's the same set of, you're looking at it through the same lens. Right? Because what we're getting is go ahead.
Through the year, would it be worth adding a skinny 4th column that says status completed February 24 in progress for the next item? Would that be a way to keep a snapshot going?
You could, or you could just use the evidence, and if it's decommissioned, it's not bold, it's bolded if it's new, and it's, I think there's probably more than one way to do it. I just think that I just would suggest strongly that we look at the same type of document every time we look at the document, as opposed to a different format.
I'm happy to do that if we get a consensus of what that actually looks like, right? And you may say, well, you're a superintendent, you should bring it. Well, in all honesty, I'm trying to. So any help and assistance and guidance and direction is helpful here.
Jill, can I
Yes,
just ask
please.
a question? So the evidence column, I'm trying to understand really, I mean, because that is so high level and it's just basically things that we're doing operationally. So in my view, the quarterly update, I would love to see as the evidence column, here are the things that we did
Yes,
in this quarter
yes,
related to new PDEC to design and facility,
Yes.
similar to what you have been doing. And that would just be the update in place of this evidence, which is basically, this is what we do operationally every single day, which to me isn't really valuable. I mean, it's valuable for your initial kind of strategic plan layout of
Yeah.
this is what we're going to measure. But the update itself should essentially be in the evidence column,
yes.
talking about the update of this is all the different things that we did, have been doing. And I agree with Julie. I mean, maybe that little column is kind of status, it's like this is happening. You know, because you had done that in the quarterly update. It was
So-
kind of ongoing, completed, progress, and there's a color coded green, red, yellow, which I thought was really helpful. And it's just the fourth column at the end that kind of shows here's. To me, it's not a very difficult thing to kind of move from this broad document to a quarterly update format, and the evidence, just here's what we did, and then there's a fourth column that says status green, red. The kind of color coded one, really quickly look at and see, are we on target or are we not? And here's red, which means we're kind of flagging something is wrong.
Yeah, okay. Yes,
But I like the idea. I like how you're doing this. I like the key performance indicator addition. The only question I have is the KPIs. Where is that going to live, that data? Is that basically a separate data dashboard, or are we going to have that as part of the quarterly update somehow?
Well, if the quarterly update, a master update, whatever it is, reflects the data, we'll show it on the dashboard when that's done. If that's
That would be great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
as
so.
that's really the metrics. That would be helpful.
some case the evidence.
But I don't want to set sail on that. I don't fixate on this, but I need to understand this clearly because I need to tell. I want to make sure we're clear about it. I don't have a pleasure. I don't need to walk away from pleasure. I don't need to walk away from the table right now with the understanding. But before I set sail, I want to be sure. There's another part that we did at the end of last year was on these action steps. We updated all of those action steps as to what the action step was that we said we were going to do those.
Yeah.
If you go back and look at that, all those action steps were updated
live
as a
there.
status report. So I just want to make sure that we all know what we're talking about. We've all got.
Okay. So let me summarize and somebody correct me if I get anything wrong. So this is more or less the format. What we would like to see on we do it 3 times a year, is under that evidence column, please update whatever the most recent evidence is. I mean, it exists. If no work has been done, don't. And that list will tell us each quarterly what we're doing. These actions, strategy, the actions, the timeline should be relatively static because they're fairly high level. If there is a new action, by all means, but it should be fairly static. And then that way, when we get to the end of the year, we have a comprehensive list of what's happened through the year. From having to be, that keeps us from having 4 different documents. It's one document that gets updated, gets signed off on, and then updated through the year. KPIs, I think it's great to identify at a high level what KPIs we're looking at, but really they'll need to fall in amongst the pieces of evidence where appropriate. If they don't, if it's a high level and it's, it's assessment data.
Jill,
Yes, go ahead.
just one thing on the data, because that gets to be a huge amount of data that we're talking about. I think it would be a very manual process if you're asking for that to then be put into each
Okay.
evidence thing in this Word document.
Okay,
Realistically, that kind of data is going to live in some kind of
the dashboard.
a dashboard or a
Okay.
data warehouse or something, because it's going to be a
To keep
massive
updating it. That's a
amount
fair point.
over the course of a
Transition it
full
over.
year. What would be easier, I think, just operationally would be to have that data warehouse with that spreadsheet kind of thing organized into strategic goal area 1 measurements, goal area 2 measurements, and it's the data along each of those kind of goals that we could have as kind of a corresponding separate document to say, oh, here's how we measure. Was trying to manually update it in a Word document
I
every
love that.
single time.
Much better.
You know, yeah.
Yes, sorry to interrupt. Can I just suggest that perhaps if we are looking to have data presented in different ways, that maybe we could move that to an offline conversation where someone might, draft their proposal of how, so that way today and at the table, we can do the work of the content and substance of these.
Sure. Well, I think we're in agreement on
Yeah.
what the overall format and use looks like. Okay.
Okay, do you want to just go through, start with the board goals?
Yes.
These board goals haven't changed. So the first one was to talk about metrics itself. So it really, long and the short of it is it ends up in developing a data dashboard that's reflective of the board goals and the strategic plan.
Any questions?
The second was the teach and learning. Again, these are not specific, and they will be specific around. Why did I pick 3, 5, and 11? 3 is such an indicator. 5 is an end of an elementary experience. 8's the end of. It's not as if we're not going to look at middle school. It's not as if we're not going to look at grade 7 and grade 4 and so on. But in terms of the point of metrics and completing schooling, those are some of the things. And we would look at some subgroups. ELL, special education, and so on.
Yeah, so I think this goal, we talked about it. I think it mixes a little bit your role and our role. So I think it needs a look because we're not assessing the board against the assessment data necessarily, but there are things I think that from teaching and learning perspective, the board cares deeply about, including literacy, including understanding the changes in ELP, the programmatic changes like to a 5-day. And the UBD and UDL certainly were following that as literacy. But I think I'd ask you to take another look at this goal and distinguish between what is yours and what is ours.
Essentially, what is, for the want of a better term, yours, ours, together, board, that whole strategy all those strategies are, what I think, are trying to accomplish in this particular area for this year, right?
Yeah.
So I can drop out like. I just put these in because I thought they wanted to remember the board too. If you don't, we can drop out the key indicators from here and we'll keep them in the strategic plan because anyway.
Well, right. So I don't think these are board KPIs, but and I just would add monitoring the ELP program shift as well as the administrative structure.
Oh, hold on. Okay, so what?
The ELP change and the admin structure. I know
We have ELP here.
we have
Monitor
play-based
district.
learning, literacy. But we changed the structure to a 5-day
Yeah,
program.
okay. And the other thing was the assistant principals?
Yep. But also we restructured special ed. So I think there's an overall change to how we're running admin.
I don't want to question my board chair. I'm just saying that a unified, that everybody
Yeah.
we are on the same page
Go
on
for
that.
it. Do people want that on the?
I just have a question about how this is a Board of Ed. I mean, I'm struggling with a lot of this is very, very heavy into like what the district is going to be doing that we only have a real oversight role in. And
Yep.
so for creating the actual Board of Ed goals, similar to like, improving the budget process.
Right.
This is a very different kind of thing. And it is duplicative to some extent to what we have in the strategic plan. So I'm just trying to understand what exactly our role is that we would be measured on
I'm
at the
fine
end of
with-
the year.
I'm fine with dropping this as a goal. I think it mixes organizations. I would prefer to board.
Katie? So I understand where you're coming from and I agree with that. My question, I guess, is, so here, like under strategy, the second bullet point, it says, support the play-based learning curriculum, right? And the supporting the purchase and implementation of materials. Those things I think do fall under, our purview where adopting new curriculum is going to come with a cost and those types of things. So I do like the idea of recognizing and documenting our responsibility in that, but I also agree about keeping clean the separation of, who's doing the actual teaching versus what our role is in supporting.
Yeah, because if we're going to use it that way, then we do a planned expansion, staff and facility programming. So, if you want to use it to capture.
I'm happy to take whatever level the board wants to. In the past, historically, actually, it used to be very curricular oriented. I don't know if anybody has the memory for
board
that.
goals?
The board goals were very curricular oriented. In fact, we didn't have other goals, and the members of the cabinet went and executed on those particular on those particular
There
areas.
have been many different
There's
iterations.
different, yes.
Because we have two different sets of goals, I would prefer to keep the organizational boundaries clearer.
Thank you. I just want to play devil's advocate for a minute, because I do think that we hear some board members kind of yearning to be more focused on the curricular parts of it. So I want to make sure we don't walk away from this too easily for people who, think we're the Board of Education. We need to be all over the curricular educational elements of things. So I just pose that to the rest of the board. And then the other piece of it is the advocacy part of it, going back to the budget thing, recognizing our role in making sure that we're on top of programs that are being proposed and developed and whatever, and that we're prepared as board members to advocate for those moving forward, that we're taking an active role in them.
I
So
think a lot of that's goal 3 already, that's articulated right behind it. I hear your point, though. I do think that we are interested in being education first. I just want us, and I'm asking administration also to think about not making it look like we're honoring our things or
But I think
repeating work. Go ahead, Dennis.
Sorry, but I think in this morning, I think we struggled with Patrice on the first thing is vision is, student achievement. And to me, maybe it's the wrong verbiage, but teaching and learning is student achievement. Maybe we change it to student achievement. I don't know, but I think that's where we were struggling this morning is I think that's that's the first thing that comes up in our self-evaluation. I was actually thinking maybe this should be our first goal and not our second goal.
It's like growth and student achievement
Right.
ultimately, not teaching and learning, because the teaching and learning is really the
Right, is their
operational piece,
role, right? But
which
our
is
role is
Dr.
student
Adley.
achievement.
And we are trying to help
Okay.
kind of achieve growth and student achievement ultimately,
So
or to
maybe we
guide
just
that.
change that to that. But
Okay.
To me, I think it
Yeah.
belongs to us.
Okay, so I need 2 people to volunteer to work on what they think this goal and create some information for it and provide some direction. Anyone? Greg and Dennis? Great. Okay, if you guys would put together something and send it on and take a look at it in August. And I can send it out to everybody before. Thank you. All right, goal 3.
This was just to align the work of strategic work with the board of the FY26 budget. There was to be a budget goal of some description. And I have put in here early identification of budget priorities in alignment with Board of Education, whatever guidelines I'm getting from the board here. It won't be exclusively like that's the number or whatever, but taking into I think this is the direction this board's going. If it's not, you can tell me differently, but it sounds as if you would like to give the sort of general direction around what's reasonable or not. If it's not reasonable, I can bring you back and tell you it's not reasonable for whatever reason. But that doesn't need to be the indicator. But I mean, that's
So the evidence on here is the HHR evidence, but
HHR.
Yeah.
What?
it's just the wrong set of evidence.
Oh, sorry.
But anyway. I think
Oh,
I think the
sorry.
way you've written the strategy,
Yeah,
the action steps aligns with what we've been doing so far, although people are willing to.
I think that the wrong evidence for that one. I do. Yes.
You good with this one otherwise? Katie?
I just wanted to respond, to Alan, what you were saying about us giving you guidance and reiterate what I said philosophically about, I think it's important for you to tell us what the educational needs are. I do think in that it is, I do want to know, about initiatives ahead of time. I don't want to be surprised when I open the budget book. I want to make sure that there aren't major changes that are being driven by budget decisions as opposed to discussions on student impact. Those are the things that I think are most important about addressing the budget more than targeting specific numbers.
Okay, are we good on this goal? All right, there's a facilities goal. Anyone?
Could you switch that to the next slide, please? Sorry, my computer's charging. Thank you.
Because the facility study is scheduled for the following year. So this year it's just HHR. As anything outside of the capital process. Okay. 05.
This is around the communication. I'm thinking some of these indicators may come from the climate survey or other survey that we have administered, and we could consider re-administering some of the aspects of it.
I don't know that it belongs in this goal, but we could stretch it. We just talked about working on our orientation process, including a board handbook. This would be a good place to, we should memorialize that work.
Anything that came out of this morning with these are the places board goals that probably should exist. Yeah.
The other thing we talked about is, overall work on meeting efficiency, which we definitely had as a goal last year too. And some of the indicators for that were, how we use committee meetings, being more streamlined in our large scale, our main budget meetings, regular Board of Ed meetings, excuse me. And then also, I think, Greg helped me refine this language, but more, better follow through on when we have a topic, there's sometimes some follow-up items and sometimes there's follow-up discussion. So just making sure that our follow through is a little tighter. Does anybody else have anything from this morning?
Jill,
Yeah.
just
Robin.
one thing, and this might be, we kind of talked about this as part of the communications committee, but the evidence to improve, for instance, the Board of Ed website page where we have some of the documents, for instance, embedded in links so that it's easy access to the public to be able to find the strategic plan, the goals, the master agenda, and, potentially within a master agenda, be able to link to whatever it was, the specific meeting materials for that date, just so that the public can easily find, okay, I'm interested in this topic. Now I know when it's going to happen and here are the materials for it, or they can go back to it to watch it. Because I think that we did hear feedback that it was not intuitive and it was very hard to find things a lot of times. And this would help to just, I think, enable better public awareness and communication, potentially, just within using the website a little bit and making it a little bit easier.
I don't mind picking your brain on actually sitting down and looking at that website and seeing what that actually means.
No, I know.
If you don't mind, because well, it's not completely intuitive. It's and anybody else actually, if you think,
Be happy to.
what do you think for that particular topic, right? That particular topic.
Are you on communications?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
we had
that's okay.
talked about
Topics
this.
for communications.
Well, yes, I mean, the website's been a topic of discussion
Yes.
many times
Oh,
in
no,
communications,
that's-
but I think this is a little
More
like, can we do
specific.
some band-aiding and just with what we have right now, make,
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Then the other thing I had an idea about is that to the extent that for the music certification, they did their own kind of
Yeah.
website that showcased student art and different things, to have, some of that when we're talking about, highlighting student and staff experiences, we can do it digitally to that extent as well. And I don't know if that gets into more of our strategic goal of like the website as a project. But, to the extent that we want to do that, we have things that have already been built that we could,
Yeah.
highlight and showcase as part of the digital piece as well.
Okay.
Just when we finish that, does the board want to, just for the, and I'm happy either way, we've got the key indicators in the strategic plan. Do you want to take out the key indicators for the board plan or no?
I don't think we have a yes or no on that
Okay.
yet. Greg and Robin, will you guys take a look at how we're using KPIs and do some thinking on both the board side and the strategic plan side?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. The strategic plan, if Amy, you want to, the format's the same as I just spoke about in terms of we changed evidence and we added in the key performance indicators. I know they need to be fleshed out, but if they are off this type of thing you're thinking about, then we will flesh them out. But Amy, you just keep it, Madam Chair, do you want to just talk at a high level about this?
I think keep them fairly high level, yes. And then if people have questions of areas where they want to.
So I've explained what was revised or how we're notating the revisions, the deletions and so on. So just at a high level.
Sure. As everyone knows that we've completed the work of PDEC and the group really needing to have a revised educator and leader evaluation and support plan. So this next, what you'll see here, just want to point out, if it says new, it's not necessarily new work to the district, because that would be alarming, right? We've talked about kind of reducing the number of new initiatives in the district. It's really new language in many cases to the strategic plan. And I'm recalling our conversation earlier this morning with Patrice and the discussion about some of those indicators actually in the CABE rubric, and then our conversation around our focus on high leverage instructional practice or high quality instruction and focusing on that more. There's an attempt here with some of this new language to make that more explicit in the strategic plan. So you'll notice there's a focus on high leverage instructional strategies, thinking about while we have a revised PDEC plan, we really need to be calibrating our lens on what do we mean by high quality instructional practices? Like Mrs. Nelson was saying before, how do we ensure that that's actually classrooms, right? What do we mean by that, and how do we make sure? We've talked about ensuring that we have PLC. That's an opportunity to calibrate and talk about instruction when our staff is not right there in the moment with children. It's a reflective opportunity to refine our definition of that. Shirley mentioned earlier a look at core instructional practices, what's happening in the general education environment. That's newer, I guess, modified language. And then, of course, when we're talking about play-based learning, we want to ensure that we have a shared understanding of what that is. Change the language for the board updates, because the language before was a little bit, I feel like a little unclear as far as evidence were the board updates. I think really there, the action is making sure that we're keeping the board apprised of what are the shifts in instruction, what are the high leverage impact strategies we're focusing on for teaching and learning and our outcomes for student achievement. So that's how that language is a little bit different there. 1B, you'll see here that we've talked about and making sure that we're following our curriculum writing and revision development cycle. We have a timeline now established so we can advise the board of when we would recommend that curriculum is revised or written over a 7-year cycle. We have a very clear, I shared just in the, I think maybe last night you got in the packet, an update for the curriculum work that's happened in EduPlanet. What are those stage 1 pieces and what is the ongoing curriculum work? Of course, we'll have to revise some curriculum because of the play-based learning requirement, and also with regard to our literacy work that's happening K-3 at the start. We're also wanting to make sure there's been a lot of conversation at the board table with Vision of the Graduate, making sure that we're involving the competencies of Vision of the Graduate in our curriculum writing efforts, but that we're also being very explicit around the standards. And I would say beyond the standards, the knowledge, skills, and discipline that we really want to focus on in each of our courses or curricular units K through 12. We also talked earlier today about the SRBI protocols. That there's room for improvement in tightening those up. That'll be part of the work that Shirley and I engage in together with our team, so that we can look at data a little bit differently there and ensure that the process is really tight for how goals are written for children who are getting those tiered intervention supports. Job embedded professional learning is something that we are continuing to work on, and really this is around increasing capacity of a teacher, find leadership and voice in their learning and to share their learning with others. So that is goal 1. I can keep going unless we want to have questions.
Stop at 1.
Not really a question. Something, the acronyms, someone who, not sure what job embedded professional learning is, understands what JEP. There's a lot of acronyms in here.
Alphabet soup.
Yeah. And without a dictionary, you're lost.
So some strategic, it's like another language. Some strategic plans actually have a little bit of a glossary where if you're unsure, you could kind of go to the back.
There was actually.
I thought we had one at one point.
Yeah, special ed definitely does. I thought there was one in the strat plan. No,
I didn't remove it, but I'm happy to.
add it. Okay. Robin?
One thing, just in terms of the order for the timeline, anything that is just year 4 as opposed to years 4 and 5, to me, would it make sense to have that up at the top? Because to me, when I look at something and I want to kind of skim it quickly, I'd love to see it kind of in order, just in terms of the timeline and process standpoint.
What do you mean?
It seemed like, for instance, new implement planned literacy pilots just happening in year 4, same thing with the grade 8 SRBI protocols that are at the very bottom. Because some of these seem like they're longer term, they're ongoing for the next couple of years, but I don't know if this is done in an order of priority or how the actions were kind of put in order.
In many cases, the actions were put in order based on what was other plan or what some of the work was that was outlined in the earlier plan. I would defer to Dr. Adley and our board chair. To me, that recommendation makes sense to start with what's in year 4.
Just the near term, the kinds of things that are happening, kind of, but if to the extent that there is more of a near term kind of a component.
If you want us to, if you'd like us to line the 24, 25 year, put those things in order first of all before 24 to 26, because but there was thought about where do they go? Are they happening this year, next year, or over the 2 years? So
I think it's helpful to the extent that the shorter term kinds of things and the ones that are I don't know, I just like those are the things you're probably focused on that we'll be getting updates for Q1 and Q2 updates, most likely. So it seems like we should follow up. Just a question.
Building on the earlier discussion about, building capacity we talked about it, with this memo, and then we're talking about it here. I think one of the challenges with this is we are clearly developing capacity, but I can't see where any of the capacity is. It would be nice to have some level of explicitness, right, in about where the capacity is coming. So we are doing some Horton Gillingham, we are doing some restorative, it's in other places, but that helps us understand the universe of what's inside of that year 4 for the capacity. I don't know, there's some fuzziness between B and C there. I defer to you in terms of where it goes, but. Okay. Goal 2.
Okay, so goal 2, fostering culture that promotes wellness, diversity, and inclusion. There was not a lot of explicit language in our last rendition of this plan around the school climate survey. And that so much speaks to so many of those action items that are here in this revision. We've revised the action item around outlining a wellness program for staff and implementing that throughout the district. We've added, again, specific information about not only administering the climate survey, but ensuring that our school improvement plans have aligned action steps that are responsive to those communities within the district. And you'll notice that there's been a revision on the item with regard to grading. The The work still needs to be completed around the elementary updated progress reports and aligning those to some of the shifts in the curriculum that have happened and will happen. We also want to ensure that we're having responsive strategies and that are, again, this connects back to our SRBI protocol, that we're really writing very clear goals and objectives for our students. So much of that work is about really responding to individual student needs. 2B is where we took primarily the work that was taken from the considerations of the I report. And what we did as an administrative team, if you'll recall, was prioritize those considerations. So what you see here is the recommendation from the administrative team. And what we wanted to do is make sure that we embed, we've discussed this before, we want to embed those considerations throughout the strategic plan. So you'll see several of them here. So for example, developing action steps for parent partnership, making sure that we're continuing to liaison with community organizations. There was information in that report that talked about identification for students who receive gifted services. So that's in here. Certainly there was information about differentiating for individual learner need and providing access. You see that here with UDL. And then the piece about making sure that we have implicit bias training, which is a requirement, and Marge can certainly add on to that, and records for staff participation.
Would this be where we might want to capture the smart device new program implementation for the climate piece 2A?
It's a good question.
It's actually not in technology because it could be in the technology goal.
It would be, I just thought it'd be interesting as a climate piece because the evidence would be interesting to consider as far as obviously numbers, but you know, kind of the interpersonal piece of it and the thing like that. Start to see the lines.
Actually, it needs to go somewhere. Is the answer.
Yep.
That was the answer.
Okay, good.
I don't want to open another conversation about how this document is organized, but I do think for us to think about would be how certain goals might cross-reference, and maybe that's one of them. There was another one on here. I think it was, I'm sorry, Cass, I'm asking you again. Do you mind going to 2A for me? Thank you so much. So like, for example, the progress reports, right? I feel like that might be another one that cross-references. I did want to ask about as well in this goal and in talking about strategy, action, evidence, KPIs, how this might help inform our discussion in the review of initiatives as well, right? The sort of mental health department that was created a couple of years ago and the director, and just sort of thinking out loud about how we might use these in multiple ways to inform some of our conversations.
I think the domains do cross a lot of areas from, I'll just take the first one, from safety, teaching and learning, leadership and efficacy, even just in terms of the new administration that we're putting on, and so there's opportunities there to use it.
Well, that wellness program for staff implemented. We really have one for students and staff. Right? Or I don't know if the program, but in 2A, I think students is missing there.
Right. And I'm sorry, I didn't say, I think that in talking about the metrics too, is this climate survey the only thing that we're using to sort of measure against? It seems like there might be some additional metrics needed.
I agree with what Katie's saying. This also is our whole mental health initiative that we are doing as a school and evaluating. Is it working? Is what we are doing achieving what we want? And I don't see really where in this we're going to see that unless it would come out in whatever data or KPIs would do.
So we're moving, this
It's a good point.
Yes, it is a good, it's a valid point. It's a wee bit like the teaching and learning.
And is that a Board of Ed goal to evaluate kind of the effectiveness of the, I don't know, it's,
Yeah, if we want a Board of Ed goal about evaluating the effect, maybe on.
I don't know if that's more of an administration kind of goal to evaluate programmatic effectiveness, but this is something that's a high level piece that I would hope that we would want to kind of understand and be able to see and measure.
Okay,
And is there like a target?
right.
Like when do we know we've hit success?
For cell phones, for instance, that policy, is that?
Do we know it's successful? How do we know it's successful? What are we looking at to determine that?
Okay.
Like, is there, yeah, like if it's a school climate survey, if that's the only thing, like what metric, what results from that define success?
Well, I agree with you there, and that would be the same level of like, we talked about the academic performance of students in 3, 5, 8, 11. We still have to define what that is,
Yeah.
right? And it's the same here, Greg.
But I agree about the devices. I really do think that goal area 2 is a very appropriate area to have that in, because to me, it's not a tech initiative. It has to do with, the reason we would even do it is because of student wellness.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I would just
Obviously,
echo
teaching.
Greg's sentiment here that given the way the brackets create, maybe look at who the vendors are or what we're really measuring. So maybe a vendor review or something would be worthy for this particular goal.
This is our most critical work, but I do also just want to give us a time check. Because we're supposed to be interviewing at 3. And we have quite a ways to go. So, just an FYI. Although this conversation's been important. Go ahead, Amy.
Okay, so goal 3 is really primarily around vision of the graduate. And what we've talked about here is adding academic excellence. Again, you'll see the language around development of skills, disposition, knowledge, skills, and disposition. We've also talked about ensuring that we're getting feedback from recently graduated students about their preparedness. And we've talked about that before. Another big, thing to focus on here is thinking about how will the district not only assess vision of the graduate, but store that information, thinking about a type of portfolio system that would move with our students up through their grades. And again, the connection with our work in the area of curriculum with vision of the graduate. There's also a piece here around transition programming, and that's around programming for our students who are serviced in the SESS.
Any questions on 3? Okay, 4.
Moving on to 4, expanding professional capacity of staff. And this is where I think we can look to maybe clarify a bit about some of the capacity discussion that we were just having, and what areas are we growing staff capacity. One of the things that we'd like to focus on here again is increasing teacher voice in their professional learning, providing choice. And also, just like we want to differentiate in the classroom for our students, we want to be able to differentiate for our adult learners. The focus of the new and revised plan is around really educator growth and leader growth. We also want to focus on potential for career advancement in district. We've done some pretty significant work already. I've mentioned this before, in creating onboarding system for our new to district staff, our new administrative staff. We also want to, I think, really think about how we're leveraging PDEC as a body to inform professional learning design, to really have a needs assessment of what professional learning is the staff looking for, and then making sure we're gathering feedback on the effectiveness of the professional learning that's being offered in districts.
Marge, anything else from you or?
Just one on 4A. It does seem like there's some interplay between the KPIs and some of the evidence items that are here, like this top one, retention rate, survey data, exit interview data. Someone asked about, is that going to be public? Is that going to be like on the website? I think like something that's sensitive like this probably is important to be part of some of that, but not necessarily just sitting there on the website.
Okay.
Can I just question?
Yep.
I'm sorry to go back to the goal 3. I was just looking at the part that was deleted. Crossed out part in 3B.
3B.
In developing systems to inform, measure, enhance implementation of vision of the graduate. It's the crossed out part that said explore assessment and monitoring systems for measuring.
Go ahead.
I think it was repetitive, actually.
Was it?
It was repetitive,
It's
right?
repetitive.
If you can look at the
So it's
first,
up above.
if you look at the first
Oh,
item in 3B, determine how the district will measure, use, store, and
okay.
analyze data, we just felt it was
Okay. all right.
duplicative,
Sorry.
yeah. So we didn't take the
right.
intent out.
Okay.
Okay.
Just one more on for the professional capacity. And if I missed it in here, please feel free to point it out. I just want to make sure that in this goal and in our endeavors, that we are really striving to make sure that whatever time we're asking of our teachers to engage in these is really worth their time, especially when they involve pullouts of classroom. So whatever measures we need to implement to make sure that we're getting the right feedback, that the teachers, that they want this, that they find it beneficial, I think is really important. I just think given some of the challenges that we've heard over the past couple of years from the staff, we want to make sure that we're focusing on quality over frequency.
That's always the struggle, right? That if we don't have separate dedicated professional learning time when the kids are with us, then you're pulling teachers offline is where they need to be with kids. And staff also needs professional learning throughout the year to stay current in their practice, ongoing. So
I think a metric that would be helpful to understand, but to that end is how much time staff are spending in professional learning. I know we know how many days, but over and above that.
you mean outside of the signature days that the
Yes.
district has on the calendar?
Yes.
Quick question, just around modality, is it always in person, is it online, or there are other options? I don't know if we've explored any of that over time.
Both. We sometimes have in-person opportunities for professional learning, and sometimes it's more like Zoom or webinar.
Is it always synchronous or is there asynchronous?
More of our opportunities now are synchronous, but we do have some that are asynchronous. Some of those would be also a lot of our mandated trainings.
Not that I'm suggesting they spend their weekends doing training, but I just don't know if that gives greater flexibility within some of what has to take place. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Goal 5, developing and enhancing systems to promote efficiency, coherence, and communication. There is overlap here probably with the efforts of the communications committee, the communications plan. There's commentary here for the district website. The question before was, who is winning here? I think that was how it was phrased. So that's kind of reflected here in the action step. We have to be thinking about that when we're considering a redesign of the website. Really wanting to ensure that the guiding documents are aligned throughout the website and throughout all of our reports to the Board of Education and the public. Ensuring that the policies that the Board of Education develops and adopts, that those are aligned with the vision, mission, and goals of the district is important. The consideration of a new student information system is also included in Goal 5. And we made the correction before. I think Dennis had pointed out it maybe before said Power School to Aspen. So we've switched that back. Okay, Goal 6, improving school facilities for student safety and access to learning. There's language here around identifying.
Sorry to interrupt. Just on goal area 5 and the KPIs, since this is really a lot of technology too, and we're saying improve satisfaction on communications indicators. I also think we need to have improved data and metrics warehousing or in whatever system or ways that we are trying to do this. I think the key component is the usefulness of the data, the organization of the data, and does it enable us to achieve and measure what we are doing? Not only in, general education, but also special education and making sure that our systems are giving us what we need.
Yeah, some of that belongs in 7, which is the
I'm
actual
sorry.
technology
Okay.
goal.
Sorry about that.
But there would be ones that would be specific to communications.
Yeah.
Data and metrics around communication, but the warehousing, I think, is 7.
Should we continue? Goal 6, improving school facilities for student safety and access to learning. Most of the language here has to do with the work with HHR and the recommendation for the architectural study for MMS is to consider recommendation funding for FY26. So I think that's maybe been pushed out.
I think we took out with the Explorer the energy conservation status, I felt we wouldn't continue that. It's in the works right with Oxbridge, the solar, and then we would go to HHR. If we want to keep it in sort of until it's a complete, that's fine too.
Well, there was a problem with the supply chain, right? So why don't you come back to us and just talk a little bit more about what's going on there instead of inside of this? In August, I guess. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? Here we talk about a architectural study to evaluate Middlesex. And in the memo we discussed earlier, we talked about an architectural study for Tokenique, Middlesex, and DHS. Are we separating them or are they just,
It would be one study,
okay, so should this say all three?
probably.
Okay.
Are we voting on this?
What's that, Dave?
Sorry, the architectural review, are we going to vote on that separately aside from the schedule?
Yes, that'll be in this year's upcoming budget.
Thanks, Jill.
Goal 7?
Yeah.
Improving technology to support teaching and learning. So part of this goal has to do with kind of the student as the important stakeholder and end user. The other part of this is more about the infrastructure. So you'll see that throughout. Something I want to point out from a curriculum standpoint is the focus on STEM programming. There will be curricular implications for that with the elementary science curriculum and thinking about the secondary course offerings. And also LMS in this case, again, where probably a glossary would be helpful. Instead of learning management system, here it would be library media studies. We've talked about before at the board table, we need to consider really ensuring that we have a full developed curriculum that's implemented and that includes digital citizenship. So again, some of the not only mental health pieces for technology and our students' use of that, but also how they responsibly use the technology that's in their hands and how we support them in that. And then 7B is around the efficient operations of the district, and that's more of the infrastructure slide, I would say.
So if we could please add to that, I'd asked for an overall look at sort of our technological footprint so that before we do a large scale purchase, we understand where the gaps are. So I think that would be something to understand here, please. Robin?
Yeah, and that was getting to what I was asking for. I wanted to also ask, and I don't know if this should be in goal area 7 or in enhancing teaching and learning, but the technology, I would want to make sure that the technology to allow for students to have consistent access to various like back-end resources, since we don't really have textbooks anymore. And this is maybe more particular to the high school, where for the teaching of the same course, for instance, depending on which teacher a student might have, there might be different resources available if students have questions. And it would be great if all of the students could have access to the same resources for that one course so that regardless of which teacher they actually have, they have the access to the same materials, because we don't even have textbooks in many cases. And some teachers will do study guides, they'll do class notes, they'll have presentations, and other teachers won't necessarily have that. And I'm thinking about it from a curricular standpoint. I don't know if this has to do with what EduPlanet will allow us to have, or if it's more of a back-end technology infrastructure that would make it easier for teachers to share across a particular class. They do this in colleges, I know, where, all of that is available to students regardless of which teacher they have teaching. And so it's just a question if it's curricular or if it's really tech. So I think it's helpful.
It's one of those that's probably an overlap. So of course, teachers of the same course have the same purchase materials that the district has purchased. AP, for example, is very prescriptive. Every teacher's is very same thing. Then, of course, teachers develop some of their own resources, and maybe that's what you're referring to, that there may be some variance teacher to teacher. That is where EduPlanet 21 is very helpful, because those resources and materials are included in that platform so that all teachers can access those. And then as teachers innovate and create new things, they have access to one another's work.
But I would want to make sure that the students can access those, because my understanding is that in many cases, if a student has a certain teacher, they cannot get access to a Google Classroom for another teacher's back-end resource materials.
Is
And
that
so
in
this is
7A? where we
detailed
have,
discussion, but I think it's important.
I think probably some build out under 7A where you have analysis of instructional technology software usage rates and effectiveness. I think there needs to probably be some build out in terms of what that means, because there's a lot of different ways to cut it, including equal access.
I've just heard this feedback from it has happened where, it's difficult for students to access some materials that I would think all students should have that are taking the same course.
Yeah.
This is more of a high school issue, I think, probably at the lower levels, not AP.
Okay.
Can I just say that, Ms. Nelson, if we could also just look at that offline a wee bit? Just
Yes.
ask Amy to look at like what
Yes,
that
we're asking
entails.
her to build
It
that
sounds
out.
very easy and it sounds, we should do it, but I just want to,
Yep.
Thank you.
okay.
Good. Okay. So we'll vote on the board goals and the strat plan next meeting. So please take some time to go through it. Some of you have already agreed to, and send feedback. in
I can
advance
just
of-
say to the board, that I've said this before, that even this morning, I don't think you give yourself enough credit, because for board goals and strategic plan, no matter what shape they happen to be in, or the goals or the work that's to be done or still to be done, you pay attention to it, you monitor it, you support it and create the conditions for it to happen, and it does guide the work. Like, it's a real document. It may not be perfect, but it's a real living document, and I thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, update on enrollment for the 24-25 school year, scheduling and discussion and possible action on setting elementary class sections. We set elementary class sections every year, standard practice. So anyway, Rich Rudel style,
Yep,
because
we'll
it's
do it quick.
2:30.
So overall, we are asking to set 108 elementary classroom sections. There are a budget of 108 elementary classroom sections. Overall enrollment is 14 students below projection K5. Well, overall compared to last year, we're 6 students flat year-over-year. The big changes were Hindley and Holmes were under projection for kindergarten, while Oxbridge was above projection for kindergarten, and we'll move to 5 sections. And then tokens in third grade, different projection as well.
So I'll just point out that the first grade at Henley's right at the number, and Henley kindergarten is just below it. Those are the two that we're looking at, but
Just quick follow-up. So Rich, that's going to put next year Oxbridge at having 2 grade levels
So
at 5
26
sections.
So 26 total sections. I don't have 5 and
How is that working from a facility standpoint?
well, so space-wise, we are clearly, that is a challenge. Most likely the will move because we'll keep the extra kindergarten up PT room that will move downstairs. We still have the challenge of where language is traveling, which we'll have to create another space for the 4th grade that we had last year for 3rd grade. It's not ideal, right? Build it and they come, and that was for sure, right? But we're working with Chris, principal, Shirley and stuff. We've thought about, I have the issue.
As your
Julie
question,
and Robin.
Robin and Julie. What was the cause of the Darien High School plus 26 versus projection? I'm just curious.
so in 10th grade and 11th grade, our persistence ratios were greater than historical average. And so what that means is we retain more students. We retain, so not meaning like we pull them back a grade, but they. So typically, the exception with going into 12th grade, we're usually around 100%. Some kids move out because they go to another district and move away, or they move to private school or parochial school. This year, the persistent ratios were higher than.
And Holmes also negative 21.
So some of that, I believe, was in kindergarten,
Okay.
and then kindergarten was 12, and so kindergarten is obviously always the one that's a little more difficult to
Right.
project, and some of that might have to do with the current legislation.
Okay, thank you.
2 quick things, Rich. Persistence ratios, did those change much over the COVID years and the year or two after COVID, when a lot of people went to private, like, are we leveled off or at normal rates
So
now?
you're seeing more closer to pre-COVID. So post-COVID, we did see a spike in kids going to parochial school as an example in private school. We saw that a lot in the middle school, and high school, primarily not. For the most part, we're in that 99.5%. You are retaining the majority of your students. The one grade that we're typically over 100% is grade going into 12th grade, and some of that are kids moving back at the very end to get the very end.
And then the other question was I think till starts, and we have no budget control. How many students do we generally see registering for school in the last month or so? And obviously you'll let us know if we need to add a section.
Yeah, if regardless of budget control, we need to add a section.
It's not, just for the record, it's not always been an automatic that we add this, that either the superintendent asks for it or the board actually supports it, so, if we can come back and say it's 24 in one of the classes and we can handle that or other.
Understood. And we have fewer grade levels that are close to the break, I feel like, than we have in recent history, which is
Correct.
reassuring.
And I would say over the last like 10 days, it's been pretty level. We haven't really seen much fluctuation. So I would expect it probably to maintain.
Rich, are you monitoring at all? I think it's, I don't know if it's a new phenomenon or it's been going on for a while, but I've heard about this reclassing thing where students go away for 1 year to private school, then they come back, same grade. Are you
So we
monitoring
see that more in the high school area. Sometimes we'll see it where high school and middle school, sometimes we'll see the fifth graders who are going into sixth grade will leave, and they come back. Or kids getting ready to go to high school, they'll leave and then they.
Okay. Alan or Rich, is one of you going to talk quickly about the teams?
So the scheduling has moved forward, and that was it. Okay, yep. So they have been on site a number of times. I won't go through all the memos in person and remotely, and been working with our staff from a point of view of working with the central services. Amy, Marge, and Julie have been part of that professional learning experience and oversight as well with all of our principals and assistant principals, both at the middle school and at the elementary schools. So this sort of just gives you some of the highlights of it, the work that has been accomplished. You just mentioned the teams. We currently had 4-4-4. We will have 3-3-4. So that's worked out okay. And I've given some detail here about the actual work that's being completed. And you want to just talk to the highlights of the elementary and the middle school. Amy, do you want to just talk about that for a minute?
So with regard to the elementary level, something that we're happy about is ensuring that we have consistent PLC time that does not impact much direct student and teacher time in the classroom. Making sure that that's consistent across the schools is important because that will allow us time for across the district conversations with regard to curriculum and instruction. We've been able to ensure that there are 8 specials blocks, so that allows for a common lunchtime for the specials teachers. We've staggered the DI block. We're actually going to now call that what I need when instead of differentiated instruction. And we've been able to maintain recommended lesson group sizes, which I know is really important with regard to music. Something that's important to note at the elementary level, one of the tri-state recommendations was increasing rehearsal access. May have trouble coming before or after school because of lack of transportation there. So we've been able to do that with the specifics of that, of how that will be scheduled for students, sometimes during the day, during that one block. And then at the middle school level, we've reduced the number of math, science, ELA, and social studies teachers that have studies so that those teachers more have content time to provide intervention in content areas. And there's been a request to consider the flex, to consider how students who receive gifted and learning, gifted and talented services have been pulled out of their lunchtime, which we know is super important from a social perspective, especially for students in the middle grades. And so we've adjusted the flex block to accommodate with that so that they're not missing that time with their peers.
Great.
So that's accomplished within the budget numbers that we.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Any questions? Julie, then Katie.
I had three quick things. The 30-minute pullout lesson for 6-day rotation for instrumental is the same, hopefully, as what we've been doing.
Students are not having a reduced time for their lessons.
Okay, great, thank you. And for the scheduling tool, is that a software or did we purchase something? Are we subscribing to something or?
It's not a separate software, but it's a tool that MSK12 had designed and we have it, we are in possession of it and we can use it year over year.
So that was part of
That
what
was
we
part
bought
of it.
into, so to speak.
A resource that was included in their professional.
Better put, thank you. And then the last is, what is the plan for communicating the changes specifically? I'm thinking at the middle school,
So
as far as the team.
So these, all the schedules and stuff will be finished by the end of the month, right? Typically, and we'll communicate accordingly there. We have interviews for middle school principal coming up, so I don't want to make any assumptions, but as soon as a middle school principal has been appointed, we will have an outreach to the middle school community. Certainly want to get the parents together as quickly as we can, but I want to recognize like the some of them are still at the beach and doing what we have to do right summer. But we would have an opportunity to meet the principal, talk about the schedule, talk about the new technology.
I think it's important to
all that
address the
stuff.
different, the changes,
Yeah.
because whether people are new to the middle school or not, I think people
Yeah.
know what they're.
Yeah, we'll be
expecting
transparent. We'll
to
be
find.
transparent about it. Yep.
Thanks.
Amy, can you just help me reconcile a little bit of the 8 special blocks, 7 classes a day, 6-day cycle? Can you just kind of say how that works out with those different numbers pertaining to different components? Sorry, in the elementary schedule, I'm sorry. So like the second bullet says 8 special blocks into the schedule, a standard special student workload of 7 classes, and then it's the 6-day cycle.
Okay, yes. So in really simple terms, the way these teachers who teach on the specials rotation were scheduled before, there were very unequal contact times, periods with students. One teacher had, for example, I'm making this up, 35 contact periods, another teacher may have had 24. So we've been able to maximize the use of our staff and find efficiencies there from a staffing perspective. And we've done that with changing how we set up the blocks. So instead of 7, there are 8, and then also accommodates a common lunchtime, which often teachers don't have to, but use to talk about teaching and learning and their planning.
So the 7 to 8, the difference is that that's like the built-in, like kind of offer period, right, for the teacher?
Yes.
Okay. And then the 6-day cycle is, that's like the A, B, C, D, E versus
Exactly
like the
that.
8 being the periods.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, thank you for clarifying. So that's instead of the Monday through Friday, the 8 through.
Marketing, you were part of this too.
The only thing that I would say is that because of the efficiencies that were found, we may be able to offer our ELP students some additional special areas instructions. We're still working on the final schedules, but there is capacity for at least art and library and hopefully PE.
Not for this purpose, but we know we still have some gap in the contract. So I think when we take a look at that memo about the budget priorities, can we add billing to the extent that we can, but taking a look at that teacher contract and trying to get it all the way to fruition in that budget memo.
We do need a vote, Madam Chair.
Pardon?
We do need a vote.
Yes. Okay. May I have a motion to approve 108 elementary class sections based on the current enrollment for the 2024-2025 school year? Julie, seconded by Dennis. All those in favor?
Aye.
That is unanimous. Thank you, Dave. Okay, thank you all. We'll move on to discussion on revisions to approve master agenda February through August 2024. The reason it does show up at this time is just to memorialize what we've done up to this point. We only have the one meeting left on this master agenda, but just to make sure that it's reflected moving backward. I'd say the only things that Alan discussed today, we're adding 2 things to August. One was an update on the green roof. another thing.
Is it board goals, is it? But
No,
I
that
think
should be on there.
it's on here anyway.
Right. Well, any questions while I look through my notes?
Will any of this change as we revisit the budget process?
No, because this is just up through August. It's just, I mean, it's only for the next meeting.
Oh, this is only,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, I'll hop on. Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the master agenda for February through August 2024 as amended? Dennis, seconded by Julie. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you all. Okay. Update on use of technology, the personal mobile device plan, Dr. Adley. Dr. Fettigan.
We may have Mr. McGuire is on too. I want to thank him for his work. This is, you remember in the fall, Tim came to the board, and one of the things that was put on the fall for the spring was the screen time and mobile use of mobile devices and so on. So we came back in the spring, and we are putting these guidelines in this mobile device plan in place, and we shared that with the board most recently in the spring here. I want to thank the members of the community who are part of the Away for the Day. Hi, Tim.
Good afternoon.
And who are actually supporting it, and I encourage them to stay very much involved. We have met with them. We've heard from our parents, and we appreciate their support and partnership in this, because it will take a concerted effort, community effort, and this is what we are actually trying to do. I want to thank them because they will be bringing Max Stottle to parent as a part of the education of this in the fall. So thanks to that group for actually doing that. And this is fairly detailed. What you have is an implementation plan. This is kind of what was spoken of before, but we would say we'd give a little bit more detail about the rollout. We have the actual device summarized, the actual plan itself and guidelines summarized in one page. We have the frequently asked questions ready to go. This is all will be released as according to the schedule. You have a letter from my office talking about the plan and the details of it, and this is ready to go for August 13th. So I don't want to be redundant, so to speak. I will say we have not been last to the discussion here. In fact, in many ways, your board has been ahead of it from the start, from when the board, Mr. Grambling pointed this out, and we had a discussion as a board discussion. I've been part of many discussions with superintendents around the area. We looked at yonder bags before anybody has actually looked at yonder bags. They have decided to take them, we have decided not. The idea of trusting young people, well, sorry, I do trust young people, and I trust people to be able to step to the plate with expectations, but also reinforcements. And this is not a punitive, like on first offense, you get a detention. We're not doing that. Okay, we're not trying to do that. I don't happen to have personally on a personal level agree with everything I'm doing, to be honest with you. Right? But this is listening to the staff, listening to the administration, what we can put in place. We should put something in place for the high school. I've committed that, and I've shared with the board at the last meeting even, that we will look at the high school immediately in the fall. There's some more complex issues to be dealt with there. And I want to make sure that we deal with it thoughtfully, but we'll bring that back in the fall as well. That should not be a long discussion. It should not be a long process. Could we implement something mid-year? Yes, you could. But there would be nothing to stop you doing that. I just want to make sure that we do that thoughtfully. And contemplatively and deliberately. So this is, I'm happy to talk to any aspect of it. In summary, the middle school is away from the day. They can't have it at lunchtime or otherwise. It will be in the locker. We're saying that they don't need them at that elementary school or the middle school for that matter. There is a week carved out here, a wee opportunity for parents who, well, after school or otherwise, I don't happen to believe that necessarily. Personally, from a personal level, I think, but professionally, it's a place where we've landed. The elementary school, we're saying they don't need them at all. And if they have them, that they need to be in the book bag. For middle school, we don't believe that you need them at all, but we respect the people. That wasn't a unanimous decision in terms of, or even our cabinet or our administration. But if we've carved out a respectful time for people, if they feel as if they need to talk to their kids and the kids need to organize stuff after school or otherwise, okay. During the day, it can't be used. But it needs to be in the locker if it's there. We are absolutely discouraging them bringing it at all. But that being said, we're respecting those parents who want to make that decision for the school. And it would need to be in the locker from immediately they go to immediately they come back or after school. They can use it on the bus for middle school. Elementary school kids cannot use it on the bus. If there's a consequence, the consequence is the parents need to come after school. I'm sorry, I'm not blaming the kid necessarily. I'm bringing it on a phone. And honestly, it's going to be an inconvenient to the parents because I'm not disturbing school all day, every day for people to be dropping in and out of the office. So you're going to have to come after school to get it. It said that there's no consequences. There are consequences. And my guess is the parents aren't going to like it. But
Alan, can you actually back up a little bit and talk maybe as a team about the different components of device management? I would say again, as I mentioned, I'm a parent who sends 1 out of 4 children to school with a phone, 2 of whom are high schoolers because they have different capacities with their ability to deal with a phone. So I think we've heard sort of concerns about teachers, concerns about students' abilities to self-regulate. Can you talk about how you're anticipating that the classroom environment would run in order to effectively make this work? I think that's the concern.
what is
So I would say, okay, so we have children who have different abilities to self-regulate, and we have teachers who are focused on teaching. And yet part of teaching, without a doubt, is effectively managing a classroom. So I'm asking you all as a team to talk about how your vision for this initial rollout of the tech plan looks in a classroom, what effective classroom management looks like, understanding those 2 constraints of wanting your teachers to be able to be focused on learning and understanding that not all students are able to regulate with the same fidelity. Some not at all.
So are you talking about not being able to regulate fidelity around
A phone. We have some kids who can actually put it in a backpack and others who, in the most extreme cases can think of nothing else.
So
I have one of each. I have more than one of each.
I would, and then want to simplify it or misunderstand your question as a question. We want to partner with parents to discuss what's going to happen in the classroom if that's the case, and to help us with the understanding that it does happen, how best for their son or daughter to address that or respond to that particular situation.
Yep.
Invariably, just as a matter of practice, the teacher, this is a concerted effort. The teacher is going to confiscate the phone, and he or she at their earliest convenience, it may not be right after class, it will be going to the main office. The students we're going to be having education to start with. It's not going to start the first day of school. I think school starts, I think August 28th, that's Wednesday. So we are going to use Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with education to the classrooms and to the students and to the community that it will be implemented on the following Monday, or actually Tuesday, back to school after the holiday. And then we will be implement it with as much fidelity as we possibly can.
Okay, I'm gonna ask my question a different way. So in my own home, I have a lot of systems and structures to deal with the presence of devices in the home, right? We have anything from a safe where everything is locked away to specific times where things come out or don't. In the classroom, what does classroom management look like? What does the teacher look like in terms of not just from a if it comes out?
Yes.
Talk to me about the classroom and how it gets managed.
I may be misunderstanding your question. If it's without a phone, is that what you're talking about? Because of the predominant, is that what you're saying?
I think the concern,
Sorry.
pardon, you are,
Yeah.
I think the concern is that, I'm sorry if I'm unclear. I think the concern is that we have kids who, regardless of the best intentions of anybody, don't have the ability to keep it in their backpack.
not all kids have self-control.
Right.
So why wouldn't the parent just put the phone in the safe at home and not allow it in the backpack?
So that's been my parental choice, right? And at the end of the day, I think parental choice is a big component of this. If you have a kid who doesn't have self-control,
Keep it at home.
keep it at home.
Some parents aren't choosing.
But some parents aren't choosing that. So
Well,
my,
then they're gonna have.
my
Which will be
question,
disruptive in the classroom.
so that's
the
my question. Thank you. Yes, that's my question.
But even if we respectful colleagues, partners away from today, it'll be the same thing. Oh, can you not hear me? Can you hear me, Tim?
I'm sorry, it's breaking up on my side.
Our partners in away for the day, it's still big on us. If you, that scenario, right, which it would be, okay, we're not gonna have them at all. You think that parents aren't gonna send, some parents are not gonna send them to the schools still? The message is the same. So we're still gonna be left with the dynamic. We have young people who there's gonna be a process of self-regulation, maybe frustration. If actually, we've also carved out here a provision, and for some reason that the parent thinks that a student can't or has a special reason to have a phone, whether it's health or otherwise, they can make that application to the principal, and we'll consider that on a case by case basis.
I just think that it would be easier if we just, the way that they're proposing a bell to bell kind of knows. I just, hear me out for a minute,
Yeah.
because I do have students who have been in this situation at middle school and high school where cell phones were not allowed. And it worked really well. And there was teaching and instruction and social interaction at lunch, in the hallways, in the classrooms. And it's very easy. And the parents might not like it initially, but that's the easiest way to have it done. And then you don't have your teachers spending extra time in class trying to police this, which also ends up being a lot of time potentially for, especially in middle school where they're going from class to class, and every single class, there might be an issue. So that's, I think it's a valid question.
But we're talking about that, right? Are you advocating for high school being included? Is that your point?
I do favor that probably, but I know we're not talking about that right now.
So
I'm
aren't we
confused.
talking bell to bell though, all day long, not allowed to have their phones?
I think
I think that is,
It would be no different that basically the idea of essentially we've carved out a wee opportunity that if they want to bring them, they have to be in the locker. That's no different than these districts that bring them and then go put them somewhere, but that happens to be a yonder bag. They're not out during lunch. They're not out during recess. They're not out during pastime. That's not that. And we have to build up a community support, participation, partnership around this. And we have to be very clear about the message. I have driven my cabinet crazy with levels of questioning about this, what happens under this scenario, that scenario. We have to be very clear about it, what we're asking our parents to partnership ourselves in. We're essentially saying that it is bell to bell. And if you think it's any different of people who have implemented policies and so on, you still have people who are going to bring them. You still have parents who are going to say, no matter what the policy, how strict you think it is, or how liberal or otherwise, you'll still have people who will send them. You can't like under what's stopping them sending them. So they'll still be dealing with it. Anyway, I'll hold it off for questions first.
Katie.
Thank you. I think our conversation around this has taken a bit of a turn, and I think it's important for us to take a moment to notice that this can be a sensitive conversation, and we need to recognize that it means something different to everyone. So with that, I would implore all of us to continue to listen and to understand that there is emotion attached to devices and to communication and access points to our children, and that is different for everyone. I also think that we need to step back and look at this objectively as a policy that the district is implementing, especially for us as board members. So I definitely read this policy as a bell to bell. And, the kids, whether it goes in their locker, whether it's in their backpack, the idea is that during the school day, they are not to use it, even so far as the elementary students are not permitted to use it on the bus. So I think that just like any other policy, are when students break the policy, that will have to be dealt with in the building. And just like any other new policy, there will probably be some bumps as we figure this out. And we might have to go back and change certain things depending on, what level of administrative input we've had to have. So I think that we'll learn through this together. I think that, this is almost similar to dress codes in certain ways, right? Whether like are kids allowed to wear hats or not? And, does the teacher, they notice it, they're the ones who see the kids and then they escalate it to administration. So I'm confident that this might be a bumpy rollout, but that we'll work together just like we do with other policies. I do think the high school is a bit different. I appreciate Dr. Adley that you really outlined that conversation would be forthcoming. I would also, in this context, say thank you to our community members who stepped forward. And, some of the people who spoke today have been reaching out to the board for over a year. And I appreciate their dedication and their reliance on the science. That being said, I think, the high school is different specifically just for the BYO. We're not providing Chromebooks to the high school the way that we are there. So it is a different conversation. And then the last point that I wanted to make about this is that I, again, would remind us of our role in that we as a Board of Education are talking about the school day. And so, buses get into a bit of a gray area in that, but it is not our place to be telling parents what their policies should be at home. And that includes, like before and after the school. And I think an important thing to notice too about the difference between the middle school and the high school is, or I'm sorry, the elementary and the middle school. In the elementary schools, our buildings take responsibility for the kids getting home. They make sure that every kid is on the right bus, that the kid has a different change of dismissal. People are staying with the kids at the buildings if they're not picked up. That's not the case at the middle school. The bell rings and the children are free to leave campus, really however they choose, with or without a parental change. And I know that reason alone has been one, while some families and even some, educators have come out on the record saying that middle school students should have a communication pathway. So all of this to say is that I think it's important that we, stay objective and we remember our role in the policy. 2, that we read it carefully. And 3, that we understand the difference and the nuance as it's going to relate family to family. And just like any other issue where a child has a certain special circumstance, whether it be academically or emotionally or socially, I think that's where, we intervene and we work as a team collaboratively on a case-by-case basis.
Also, just for clarification to the board, but we've indicated that we're going to evaluate this in October with surveys, feedback from parents, and also the staff. Can I just ask Mr. McGuire just a comment? He was kind enough to log on today during the summary.
Please.
Integral to this.
Thank you. I feel like you guys have covered a lot of the ground here. One of the other components, maybe not necessarily spoken to yet, is the idea that we're going to try to do a little bit of data collection along the way besides survey feedback from the faculty. So we'll try to get a sense of, I think maybe to address the concern of a student that's showing up often as having a problem potentially. So there'll be some data collection. We'll have a kind of a sense, especially at the middle school, where those small number of students are that are having trouble with this adjustment, and hopefully work through guidance department with them.
Thank you. Julie, did you have your hand raised? And then Dennis.
I just a real quick thing on the memo, and thank you for including that. Helpful to see what communication is intended to go out. Personal mobile device plan guidelines didn't grab me as a mom, as this is something for my student. I think getting the word student in there would be helpful to make sure that people read it. And I might even bold or underline a couple of key sentences in here, because your August 13 reader is not quite as, focused and attentive sometimes as your other times of the year reader. But mostly I do mean the student thing, because at first I read this as the district is getting a new cell phone program.
Yeah, and
The title.
I just want to follow that up. I would say in the very, on the subject line, there should be something that basically this is a new bell-to-bell policy for elementary and middle school cell phones or something that, because it's not really clear even until you get to the FAQs that that's exactly what you're talking about. And for people that are on vacation in August, I think we need to kind of highlight maybe a little bit more clearly that that's exactly what you're talking about. And also in that first time is, we will also be evaluating this for the high school in the fall. Or
Yeah.
something, just so that it grabs their attention
I think
because it's a
that's- I
lot
think
of
the high- I think
information.
the high school is in there.
Right, but it just doesn't jump out at you. And for parents that have a limited attention span in late August, right before school, need to kind of capture their bandwidth.
Okay, so you're suggesting in the memo to families and staff, clarifying that it's students, that it's bell to bell, and that the high school is imminent. We'll be reviewing in the fall. Okay, I think that makes sense. Are there other done? Sorry.
So I think what you mentioned, Dr. Adley, that we're going to do a survey and some things in the fall. So what I'm missing with this is how we're going to measure success or failure of this. And Tim, you brought up the point of,
Yes.
if somebody's having difficulty, we're going to track them. Is that they bring their phone once a week? Is it 3 times a week? Is it 3 times a month? I mean, I'm not trying to be a nudge here, but I think we need to be clear on what is success and what is failure of this program. And what is too much for a teacher and what is not enough for a teacher.
Right.
I don't know what the Goldilocks effect is, but the idea that we have a community around support and that the community itself, I mean, greater community, feels that this is being implemented with some fidelity and it's moving the needle a little bit. How we gain that, whether it's through surveys or otherwise, focus groups are, we can do whatever we have to do. In all honesty, Dennis, the part of the scope of even getting a sense of what's the scope of the problem now, it's not that easy. Right, in terms of given the data, I go to do some focus groups with kids and hearing one thing, you do it with the staff is another. We don't have a quantify. Right now, it's not the problem itself is not quantified other than the research that's out there and the disruptions that it is causing needlessly to disruptions to the school day. So trying to quantify to me is is there a culture around not using phones during the school day? I mean, creating that culture, a greater community culture around that. Now, how I quantify that, I think it'll be the stories that we tell, with the data that we collect. I think we'll probably get people will be eager to give feedback along the way here. I'm being a wee bit evasive, not deliberately, but I just don't have a specific answer other than trying to create this culture.
I realize it's not easy. And again, I think to Mr. Sini's point, I think, we need, number one, you need parents to help. That's the key part of this whole thing to me. Elementary school would be so much easier if you don't give your kids a phone in K through 5. Simple, right? That would make life so much easier. Your point, Katie and Robin raises, we need to be progressive on this. Maybe this rollout isn't perfect. And my point is just how are we going to know if we're making changes? Are we making the correct change or not in the future? So at some point, we need to have some type of baseline to understand what we're changing and did that change affect positively or negatively? That's all I'm trying to say. I understand it's complex. I do.
And a wee indicator might be we heard from the researchers out there, and part of the research is if it becomes a sort of climate within the schools where it's cool not to have a phone. A lot of kids have phones now because there's pressure to have it, and that peer pressure or otherwise. Can we change that culture where it's okay and not the norm is not to have it? So we'll look for metrics and different things along the way to tell that story. I will just add to this. This includes smartwatches too. Okay, right. So smartwatches, cell phones, other non-age school devices and readers. That's part of this. All right. So I just want to be clear about that. And honestly, I'm going to need the board support and giving it a wee bit of a chance. Look, it's a process by iteration. If it doesn't work, then we come back to the table. But But I'm gonna need the community, the boards, everybody says support to try to move it forward.
And I think, when you say I'm gonna need it, I think, kind of back to the point, teachers will need it.
Right, yep, yes. No, well,
And I think that's an important
That's really what I
component.
mean.
Yeah. Okay, Greg.
I've heard a lot of comments around, and I guess also in terms of taking surveys from parents. So it's irrespective of our collective or individual views of the policy. Like, we heard this morning that one of our primary roles as a board is, and one of the things that we're measured against is actually listening to the community. I think what I heard this morning was that there were parents representing roughly a third by my math of our student population across all grades. And I didn't hear a single parent stand up, say, and all of those parents were saying, no phones, K through 12. So that's a third of our student population is saying, no phones, K through 12.
Wasn't a third of our parents here.
Said 500,
There was
600 people.
1,500 students on the,
Wow.
that's what they said. I'm just, we can
That was
dispute.
based on the petition.
Yeah.
High school parents.
Yeah, but they said there's over 600 parents, families representing over 1,300 students. The math is pretty simple. You just divide by the number of kids and that's roughly a third.
And that's more significant amount of anything that we've supported, I think, in the past year where we've got that
So
kind of.
are we
parent
listening to
feedback.
our community as a
So-
board or not?
What does that mean? I mean, like, what are we not doing?
Well, they're asking for a different step on this. They're saying what you've proposed is insufficient. That's what I heard this morning.
Okay. But insufficient in the sense of it doesn't address.
Well, it doesn't address, they're asking for K through 12.
Yes, we're gonna do, we're gonna come up with something with K through 12, yes.
That's not what this says, though.
Yeah, so I understand the ask, then we have parents asking K through 12. Is it feasible, given the bring your own device policy, for us to put forward a bell to bell in the high school at this stage for the start of the school year?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Honestly, it'd be a massive disconnect in the community around that. It doesn't mean to say we're not going to get there. It doesn't mean to say I'm not going to address it like immediately as school starts.
Okay, so at this stage, what you're saying is we are hearing the community say they want it through high school, or at least a portion of the community is saying that they'd like it through high school. It is something that the administration will be looking at in the fall.
Minimally, administration, we have to take a position on what is the position at the high school and why is it that position? Whether it's this position or whether it's some other
Right.
position.
Right.
And that's what I've committed. I've committed to that group of people to do that. I've committed to the board to do that. I've committed to the staff to do that.
So I hear you on listening to the community. I don't want us to make a sloppy decision. Or part of why we asked for a little time and attention to the rollout was well supported and defined before we got to 12. So, before it was put in place. So that would be my hesitation if we tried to undertake the 12 at this stage. I think, well, you're saying it wouldn't, administration saying it wouldn't be feasible to do it well. Don?
Yeah, and this board doesn't ever govern based on survey results. So I just want to make that clear. And we haven't or different programming if we did.
I don't think it was a survey. It was a letter directly to the board with signatures from 600 family.
Or petitions but I want to make that clear. Two,
Go ahead.
Two, if a parent, these don't show up in kids because the kids are purchasing them in elementary school. I don't know a lot of $800. So parents have the choice to be leaders in their own households on this. We're asking emphatically that they partner with us in the lower grade levels. If parents don't want to see high school have phones, they should also remove them from their backpacks as they go to school. But you're also in high school transitioning to college. You also have this bring your own device, policy that we have. I think we have to think long and hard if we want to implement from a board level. Parents, again, need to manage their households the way they see fit.
But this isn't their house. This is
I'm
school.
I understand that, but I'm also saying that we already tell our children to bring their own devices, in many cases with access to social media. Now, there might be ways that we can block some of that through the VPNs or portals or something, but that's something they're going to have to look into on a policy basis. But to try to implement that now within a month of school.
So I would say for us, if there's an impediment for high school at this moment in time, because for whatever reason, I don't know when that policy was put in place where they've been told to bring a device to be able to.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay, so it hasn't been in place for 10 years, just got put in place.
Well, we went 1-to-1 in 17 or something. And then kids were bringing their own devices and using them. So we, 2 years ago, stopped buying them on behalf of the kids because we surveyed the kids and 75% of the kids who were coming into school were using their own devices and leaving devices that we were purchasing in a closet unused. So that was an unwise use of taxpayer dollars. So at this stage, we have explicitly told families that they're sending in students with personal devices, many of which do have very similar texting, social media, et cetera, capabilities on them. So yes, board has.
So that clearly needs time to be figured out. I would agree with that.
Definitely.
So K through 8,
Yes.
is there a different reason?
Yes, because
for-
K through 8, the only devices that they use in the classroom are school
I'm
provided
saying,
Chromebooks.
I think they're asking for more from K through 8 as well.
Oh, they're
where
saying that schools, meaning that kids cannot.
They're asking for a pure ban, K through 12. If we can't do K through 12 for the reasons John rightfully pointed out, why not K through 8?
ban it. The difference
So
being,
it can't be in the building. Do you mean the differences?
Or the yonder bag, but I don't know what the different solutions are. K through elementary, there are kids bringing devices. I
I
have
think the
kids in
ban is not in
elementary.
the building, right?
K through 8.
So, I mean, I don't want to say it's semantic because it's not, but there's a wee bit of it that is. In practice, what is the difference, right? We are saying that the kids can't have it out during a school day. If you had a yonder bag, you'd still have to bring it to school. You still have to put it in it. You would actually have to line up, like, at the end of the day, like, I don't want to create that culture or climate, to be honest with you. It comes, and look, listen, you could say, Alan, what have we been doing all along? Well, there's been a lack of enforcement of it. You could, that's your fault then, okay. But there's been no groundswell, community, sort of like collective, okay, we're gonna try and make this the welfare of our young people. And like, well,
I think prior to COVID, it is my understanding that actually classrooms were much cleaner in terms of their enforcement about devices. But then the number of devices, and we also had the Chromebooks come in and it was post-COVID and there was something of a hands-off approach. So that's my understanding of culturally what changed. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but anyway.
But to me, the difference is the enforcement. So
Yes,
you're either
yes.
telling parents, enforce this at home, don't let your kids bring it to school, or you're saying you can have them bring it to school and we're going to have to deal with the enforcement. So it's putting on the teachers versus the parents.
The message, and you may say that it's a wishy-washy message, the message that we've landed on, we don't think that you need them. Elementary school, for instance, I've got school dismissal managers that they name, whatever that's called. Pick my kid, right? So they have other systems to be put in place, right? But even if you had a different system, Greg, the parents are still going to show up, okay? Because you in certain areas, at certain times, the kids are going to bring it. It's still going to show up. The process here is for during the school day, they don't have them, and with the difference with the middle school is that we landed on where kids could use those after school on the bus in the middle school. That's the only difference, and it's that there has to be an enforcement. I just shared with you, but I'll share with you again. The parents are not going to like this. I've already had a parent tell me, "I'm not coming after school to pick it up." And then we're going to keep it there. It'll be in the safe. Because
And I like that. I like that. I mean, that creates a problem for parents who.
I'm not blaming the
to
kids
do
for
it.
bringing. Honestly, I'm not going to blame the kids for bringing it all the time. There's some level there of like, okay, yes, we want the kids to develop independence and responsibility and feel some of the inconvenience. Maybe between the parent and the child, they can feel that inconvenience at home and so on and so forth. But
I do think there are some other, we have, heard about folks children, students who need them for medical or other
Yes.
reasons, but I think there may also be familial reasons that make it more challenging.
Yep.
Whether you have parents who are, or guardians who are not in the same location, and things like that. So I think that is somewhat problematic also, particularly again, for the middle school students.
There's perfect.
Go ahead.
There isn't.
For medical, but
No, not.
Any
not-
other
not just- not just
circumstantial.
Any other circumstance. So then there's in the FAQ.
Okay, Julie?
Just an idea, maybe a terrible one, but is there an opportunity to provide parents with some tips or ideas on things they can also be doing to help with this? Like, well, first, you can not let your kids have social media. You can require that all apps be approved by you. You can put time limits on how much time your kids have Wi-Fi, 5G, access to any individual app. Like, there are a million simple things that people could do to even mimic an 8 to 3 thing at home, or however they might want to do it. But if we could do it in a way that's, in partnership, here are some other ways. And also for students who have a need to have a phone or a device, in school, perhaps there are ways that they don't suddenly become, the center of the TikTok world because they're the one kid that has a device.
And I think the way for day parents are partners with is around education for parents. And I really appreciate that part because that's really, really helpful, the education part of it.
UA for a day,
Yes.
Yeah. Katie, thanks.
I actually think that's a great idea, Julie. And Tim, maybe that's something, well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to talk to you because it's not my job to give you jobs. But maybe that's something in this letter that I was a little surprised to find it in the meeting materials saying that we had discussed today before we had discussed today. But I think that could go in there, about some suggestions like implementing screen time during school hours so that even if your child is taking a phone to school, they aren't even able to access it. I think there's a lot of partnering that we can do. And then lastly, just on a lighter note, I just wanted to say that I think as we come into this culture shift that we're hoping to create, I think that as that grows, the schools, the teachers, the administration will be able to act very quickly on it. Because I can assure you that when my child snuck a hedgehog to the middle school, it was found out and notified, and I picked it up very quickly.
Alive,
Real.
oh, wow. Pretty good.
Oh, Greg.
Just 2 more questions. One is on the letter and outline, everything. Do we have an opportunity to provide additional comments as
Yes.
we go through it?
Send some
So I know
comments.
it's just sent, we
Yeah.
just got it a couple of days ago. And then the second question is, I know I asked Dr. Hadley and I think you responded, just in terms of like, should we have a board policy related to devices? We have one related to dress code. We have one related to social media. We even have one related to sunscreen application. We don't have anything related to devices in the school.
It certainly doesn't preclude it.
Marge, what do you see?
Well, Shipman and Goodwin has suggested that that this is something that belongs in a student handbook and is managed at the school district level. Because if you have a board policy, it doesn't give you the kind of flexibility that you all were talking about what to do about the high school. You have to just change it at the high school, you have to bring it back to the policy committee and then the board and whatever.
So is that more because of where we are in the implementation, meaning that we should get a little further along, or they truly think that?
Philosophical matter, they think that this belongs to the student handbook to be managed by the leadership. They craft one for us if we want, but philosophically, it's them at the board policy.
Marge, could we write a policy at the policy level that's a bit broad and gives discretion? I mean, then you guys would have flexibility, but we'd certainly set out what we're looking for from a perspective from the board level.
I mean, like I said, Shipman and Goodwin will draft anything that we want, but you have the policy to direct the administration to do administrative regulation.
What were you saying, John?
So I would suggest we launch this and then we can look at it at a board level once we get some data feedback, real life examples. And consider a policy at the board level. To what Dave said, kind of higher level, it gives a lot of flexibility on the operational side of things. But instead of trying to do one now before we kind of see.
Anyone else?
Just to be clear, so I'm not familiar with a Chromebook, but I know iMac has iMessage. Does Chromebook have an Android message? So if you have an Android phone, can you talk via your Chromebook or no?
You get
Shut
WhatsApp
down
or-
for the.
But can you use WhatsApp on a Chromebook?
Yeah, you can, any of the texting can be happening on
So,
a.
but that's my question. So can a middle schooler download WhatsApp and communicate
They
with
could.
other middle schools?
Let's not
Unless
talk,
we,
No,
unless we block it.
I'm going to jump in and say they can't.
they
Thank
can't
you.
tell
So
us,
that's,
because we regulate that, Tim?
We regulate the Chromebooks. That's managed district-wide.
so
Okay.
there's no ability to communicate with peers
Not
on.
for a middle schooler on a middle school assigned Chromebook.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's not to say they don't sometimes figure out clever ways, like a shared Google Doc.
They are
but-
clever.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we look forward to, we then will see that on our, we're looking at a master agenda again for the rest of the year. Next month, we'll see an update on this in October. Is that what we thought? Okay, great. Thank you all for the time. Thank you, Tim, for joining us on this summer afternoon. I like that you're appropriately summary.
I appreciate it. I hope you all have a productive rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is discussion on future review of athletic funding structure. I'll actually turn this to Julie and John, who've done some work queuing up what they think, how to frame the question for us. For questions, I think Julie did a lot of the legwork, so thank you to that, and thanks to John for helping work to the two of them for working together.
Julie
to-
did.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. Yes, then.
We're on that, we're not voting on the mobile
No.
devices, not at
No.
all, so it's just implementation.
Correct. It's not a board for the rest of vote on.
Question, thank you.
Yep. Julie, John, take
That
it
means
away.
I passed the torch to Julie to talk about it.
Is that how this goes? Because I've already done all the work, I have to continue to do all the work. Thank you. So
I'm here for you.
as Jill mentioned, John and I had some conversations, just trying to think about how we want to frame up asking to take another look or two at both athletics and extracurriculars in general. I know we've had a lot of discussion in this area. I know that the cabinet and the district has done a lot of work in this area, so thank you for that. That's not being ignored. But before we go into budget season, we're hoping that the board can kind of come together with some agreement on what we'd like to look into a little bit further. The biggest caveat is, I think John and I definitely feel, and I think we probably would all be in agreement, we're looking at ideas and solutions that won't create any barriers. We want as many people to be able to play, join, et cetera, as possible. So we're not looking to limit that in any way. Specifically on RC 11 athletics, I think we want to ask that we do a comprehensive review, or we'd like to ask for a comprehensive review to identify any potential efficiencies. So are there any things that we haven't looked at before? Are there any things available to us that we haven't done? Are there any things, and I know we've looked at other districts and I know we did the SEAC review, but are there things other districts are doing that we are not? Are there things other areas are doing that we are not? For example, Shirley, you took us through a bunch of ways you're going to look at special education in the coming year to see if there are any efficiencies. I'd love to get an understanding of what we're looking at for RC 11 in the same way, to see if there's anything else that we could try to impact. And then I think the second piece, you're welcome to jump in anytime.
So,
You want to jump in on the first piece?
no, well, yeah, I will, thank you. So we looked at the participation fees. So a lot of the work's been done. You know, that there's districts that do mandatory voluntary, do both. So not asking for new work there, but like maybe a relisting there, implementing some of the practices, advertising, which
She's
is,
still on the first question, which is efficiency, RC 11. I don't think she's to
Well-
funding structure.
oh, sorry. Sorry, then I jumped ahead. So shut up.
Back to me. So then the other is sort of the broad review of funding practices for extracurriculars, perhaps across the board. Are there any other sources of funding? Are there grants anywhere that we haven't explored? Are there fundraising possibilities that we aren't realizing, or that we have policies in place right now that are limiting the usefulness of
Private dollar.
funds raised,
So
private dollars, or by team, the team can't carry it over to the next year. Maybe they could, and it would make it more useful for a team to try to fund some of their own things. Do you want to talk about the
yeah,
private
so
dollars?
just like for an example, there's sports booster clubs, and I think we asked Chris, and I think our policies allow for that, but we can't believe those booster clubs can't pay for coaches. Where in other towns, they do, so things like that, that might open up more private-public partnership dollars along the way.
So those are really kind of it, I guess it's a deep look or a careful look. I'm not saying it, Katie, don't even laugh. A careful look at RC 11 just to see if there's anything in there that we haven't, any possibilities that we haven't realized, and then a broader kind of outside in look at, are there any policies? Are there any practices? Are there any other ways that we could be looking at doing things? Are clubs mostly fund themselves except for stipends? Is there anything that they're doing that we could copy more in athletics and vice versa? We have reorganized things across the district. Is there any sort of reorganization that would help, whether it's staffing or or to join?
Stipends?
No. Yes, conference expenses, travel expenses, all those kinds of things. Are there anything else we could look?
I'm so sorry, Julie. I was digging through looking for a memo on this. So could you just very quickly tell me again what your top 3 points were? I have the fundraising last one.
Yes, so basically what we're trying to do is get the board to buy in that this is something that we want to ask the administration. So that's the first point, because we only ask for work, right, as a full board. So trying to get everybody on the same page about what we'd like to look at. From there, we wanted to look at a review of RC 11 to see if there's anything that we haven't pulled everything out of efficiency wise.
Are we asking for a review of RC 11, or are we asking Rich that when he approaches RC 11 to do that with, and Rich and Chris, to do that with efficiencies in mind? In other words, do we want to review it? Or are we just saying these are your walking orders?
Maybe, I guess it's more walking orders, but I don't know if it's, I guess that would probably be up to
The
Rich
board.
and the people to say that's the most useful way to go about it.
Okay, all right. And your second point?
The second point is a broader review of funding practices for extracurriculars. Any ideas, any things we haven't tapped into? Sources of funding, grants, private funds, anything else.
Any policies that might limit the private dollars.
Right. Do not want to limit participation or create barriers to participation, but we want to stem the events. So other RCs are growing, or allowed to grow like this, so we need to find ways. That
We're trying to fly at the board level without getting into the operationals and saying how many coaches per sport and all.
Right.
So that's Rich, a request for information. If you guys, are you able to assess funding practices from other districts and get back to us? We're not, I don't understand that to be a recommendation at this stage, but more an understanding of what else might be out there.
That makes sense, Rich?
Yeah, I mean, so like an example would be New Canaan. New Canaan doesn't fund non-CIC sports, but they have them.
Right.
And the boosters raise the money and they donate it to the board. That money pays for the coaches and the supplies, et cetera, for those non-CIC sports. We do have a policy, for example, that doesn't let us do that because it wouldn't be able to pay for coaching. So that would be similar.
Yes. Katie, do you have a question? Okay, thank you. Now I feel ready to ask my question, make my comment. Thank you, Julie and John, for recognizing this as an important issue and for being thoughtful about the way that the board should approach it, because it is important that we approach it from our lane. I have a lot of questions about the athletics department. This was certainly one that stood out to me during our budget process. It's a huge number. It was one that grew in a large percentage and did not receive cuts. I feel the need every time we talk about athletics to assert my staunch support for the value of athletics. I, was an athlete. I find it incredibly valuable. There are a lot of lessons to be learned on the field or court or whatever. However, we are a board of education. We are not a board of athletics, and as we look at priorities and as we are facing difficult budget seasons in particular, we make sure that we are not funding things in excess over academics at the cost of academics. So I have a really, really hard time thinking about how we might look critically or make changes to our athletic department when it is not a department that I think anyone understands. And by that, I don't, certainly not a lack of understanding on my point. I don't think anyone truly does. We don't actually know what it costs to run any of our teams. We don't actually know what parents are contributing versus what they're not. We don't have any sort of level playing field or policy in this district where, we pay for all protective equipment, but not shoes. We don't have a thing where we only cut for where we don't do any cuts or we always do. I'm not saying this very articulately right now, but my point is we're a little all over the place. And unless we do a thorough review to understand what is actually happening in our athletic department, I don't know how we're ever going to make any changes. So my thought process would be that, and we tried this last summer, we tried to get kind of an independent audit, and it was just woefully inadequate. It didn't even scratch the surface. So for my standpoint, I don't see how we can really move the conversation forward about how to look at or think about things differently until we really know what we're working with.
The only thing I would argue, Katie, is I think what Julie and John are trying to do is get the conversation moving forward, but trying to say some of that information, yes, we see it in the budget book. It's, some of it's, we have multiple years of memos. So I think though that we're trying to keep the board in its lane, right, as you mentioned. So if we want, I don't know that we need to know everything about how the athletic budget works as much as we need to say to administration, this is an area where we want to support students having as many extracurricular opportunities as possible, but we think that there are probably efficiencies in that budget that you guys need to go find. So I think that's how we're handling this.
Well, that's fine. And I understand that. I maybe could reframe my comments slightly different to say, I have a hard time understanding how anyone, administration, is going to look at athletics and make changes when it doesn't seem that they themselves understand all of the intricacies and the differences team by team. Like, can anyone explain to me why we pay for some teams protective equipment and why we don't for other teams? Like, does anyone really know how much parents are contributing and how they vary across teams? Without that information, I don't know how anyone, whether it's the board or administration, is going to be able to make confident decisions.
Only together when they, go ahead, Greg.
I think for me, at least the decision point comes more down to who's going to be doing the work, how much is it going to cost? And if it's folks who are in this room, do they have other priorities that may take precedent where we think that there's more cost savings opportunities? And I don't know if there's other line items or where we should be doing the same kind of stuff or not. That to me is the way that I would make the decision.
Okay. Rich, do you have any? Sorry, Alan.
We've answered some of those questions, right?
Can you speak closer to the
sorry.
mic, please?
We've answered some of those questions, and if there's questions that people need to know again, we can get the answer. I just don't want the community to be, we don't know what we're doing, we don't know the cost of this, or we don't. There are some nuances to it about raising funds and so on and so forth, which I recognize, and it's not always straightforward. And even I sometimes go back to maybe what we're doing there in that capacity. But
I just don't want people to get the wrong impression that we don't know the funds of how much it costs for this, that, or the other, because I mean, that's not correct. I just,
So outside of RC 11 on athletics last year, we spent 630,000.
Outside of RC 11?
Say that again, Rich, please.
So outside of RC 11, the money that's collected, whether it's through fundraising or with voluntary fees like that, amounted to $638,000 across the board.
That was funded by parents or booster clubs or other?
So not out of our budget.
And what's the dollar amount for RC 11 and where does that rank in terms of the RCs by dollar amount?
In terms of so RC 11 spent just shy of $2 million, 1.98 million last year. I
So
would have to say
that's not even, I mean, we just talked about a new one that's going to be $1 to $2 million per year going. So if we eliminated the entire athletic, it would be as much as this new one we're at. That seems like
So
a tough utilization of resources.
Well, my counter to that would be that RC came to us up 14% over last year when it came into the room at the start of budget season, which when every RC is being asked to do more with less, I think we need to ask this RC to look as hard at doing the same.
So I think there's nuance here because I think that what Julie and John asked for is for an efficiency-based approach to budgeting RC 11 this year, which is a bit different from, I think, what Katie is describing. So in terms of your use of resources, I would distinguish between what's on the table.
Oh, so yeah, so maybe I was unclear. Are you guys not asking for someone outside of the team or someone from the team to look into it or I don't?
Yeah.
There's been so much work done on this already.
Yeah, I
We're just
don't know.
asking him to pilot. And if we can find some efficiencies, I will not support what is being brought forth by Katie. I mean, we're back down in the same wormhole we are every single year. And we're already an hour and 20 minutes over, so.
Yes, Katie?
thank you. I'd like to clarify a point. So Rich, thank you for the numbers on what was spent outside RC 11. That's really helpful. I just want to confirm though that doesn't capture everything, right? So like when the captain's parents send an email to the cross country team asking for parent dues, that's not in your number.
so if the money doesn't come to the district
Right.
first,
Okay.
then it's not. So if
Thank
the
you.
captain parents collect and then provide to the district.
That's right.
Check, yes, but if the captain's parent collects the
Exactly.
money and do it off site.
So thank you. I appreciate that point. And I just want to clarify that, Alan, I did not mean to intimate that the district doesn't know what it's doing with athletics. We clearly have a very successful, highly competitive athletic program. To be more specific and accurate, what I meant is we don't know every aspect. We don't know every contribution and every dollar. We just don't because there are multiple channels for them. So, as John's saying, like, oh, we've already done this a million times, we never really did do it fully. We never did it where it captured all of those different revenue streams and all the things that are being, and if that's not the appetite of the board, then that's okay. But we need to be clear about what we've done and what we haven't done.
I think the only thing I would say, just in terms of that kind of last gray box, it's a bit like trying to capture all the PTO's money, because there are monies that go to captain's parents that are, pasta dinners and things that really have nothing to do with the district.
But the PTOs aren't costing us $2 million a year.
Well, it depends on how you define cost. They cost a lot more than that if it's just schools. So I think, anyway, I think the question on the table is that will the board support two different things? One is asking Rich to take an efficiency-based approach to RC 11 this year. And I mean, honestly, that should be true in every RC, but we're certainly watching the rate of growth in 11. And the second ask on the table is for Rich to provide us some more information about any other alternative funding structures that might be out there that we are not currently using. Is the board interested in one or both of those items? I certainly am interested in the second one.
I mean, I agree that we should be taking an efficiency approach to every RC.
Yeah. Okay.
Jill,
Yes.
I agree we should take an efficiency-based approach to all RCs, and I can think of some others that actually I definitely agree with that are very large and growing much higher rate. I also agree with the funding based, looking for other opportunities for grant funding, et cetera. And I think that that would be well served. I think we have to be careful to the extent that this RC in particular is student programming. And I don't want to take away from student programs that really impact our students. And I think we just have to be careful where we're trying to find funds.
I agree. And so I appreciate that the conversation was framed that way, that we're not looking to barriers to entry. Dave, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm supportive of both. I would just hope that the second option is inclusive of looking at how we handle funds getting swept and what other people do as part of that evaluation.
Howie,
Say that second part.
Sorry. What happens to year-end balances, how we sweep and aggregate everything for teams?
Okay. Got that.
Thank
Rich. Go ahead.
Yep, I mean, so the student activity manual says that anything that's not encumbered.
Yep.
And over 1,000 gets swept. If it's encumbered or below 1,000, it doesn't.
Okay. So I do think that would be valuable for us to understand as part of the overall universe of it.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking also other districts, if that's standard or what other procedures are used, if we're looking at other methods.
Okay, good point.
Just on the student activity fund point and funds being swept at year end, I think it would be worth looking at because I know some teams do fundraising throughout the year, but then I think the current policy is that if those funds were not able to be spent in that current year, they can get swept as well. And I would like to propose that teams that are raising money for specific equipment or whatever else would be able to get to keep those funds so that they could use them.
So in an
And I don't know
instance-
the intricacies.
So in
of
an
this.
instance like that, it wouldn't get swept because
Okay.
they essentially encumbered those monies for that specific item.
And that involves clubs as well. I think that there have been instances of the quiz bowl team. I mean, and I'm sure like robotics, there are a lot of more labor and cost intensive clubs that will be doing fundraising. And I want to make sure that they get to keep the funds that
Okay.
they're raising because I think this is an avenue that we should look more into.
Okay. Point taken. Okay. Greg, then Julie. Oh, sorry, Julie, then Julie.
Quick. I think if there are things that we can't do presently because of our policies, but they aren't statutory, it's probably worth having a conversation about why we don't allow it, but it is legal. Probably worth talking about some things that maybe we don't think are good ideas going in, but worth exploring, just to say.
Okay, good. All right. Are we, Dennis, you're good? All right. Katie, you're resigned? Yes. Okay. Thank you, guys. So we have in our agenda meeting next month, we'll add that line item. Or no, excuse me, in the master agenda, not in the. Okay, further discussion and action on proposed schedule of 2024-2025 regular Board of Education meetings and subcommittee meetings. This is just a second read, right?
Yes, we did make some changes there. The organizational meeting on November 3rd, we moved to the 5th. And we still put out the communications, curriculum, facilities, finance and policy meetings if we are having them and if that's the way they're going to stand.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve, or unless there's any questions, but may I have a motion to approve the proposed schedule of 2024-2025 regular Board of Education meetings and subcommittee meetings? Julie moves. Yes. Can you just second it and then we can then ask me a question? Sure. Second. Katie seconds question. Okay, thank you.
Just on the subcommittees, I know that they changed in the fall, and I would just like to, as we move forward on these, kind of, I guess, insert a caveat that like as the committees shift, with the elections, that that each committee kind of reevaluates its dates with this new membership in terms of making sure that the days work and that kind of thing, because I know that can be really disruptive when we don't have quorums or certain people are not available. So
okay,
it's just tricky to do it now, and I understand we need to, but
okay. Point taken. Okay, Robin.
Question, is the January 4 the super Saturday for the budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
Greg.
I know we've talked about cadence of these meetings.
Yes.
I don't know if we wanted to revisit that. I just did a quick count. There's 73 on the calendar. That's more
Yeah.
than one per week.
Yeah, so it's a good point, I think our regular meeting cadence is typically twice a month. I don't think we'll adjust that so much. But I think as, you know, communication starts to wind itself down and policy comes to near the end of its audit, we might look at consolidating those two committees in November. As a board, simply that would reduce one column there. Finance, I think, does have to meet monthly. Facilities hasn't been hitting that cadence and won't, because we won't really have a need until we, you know, so I do think while there's a number of meetings here, probably we won't actually meet this complete cadence. But your point is taken, Greg.
Yeah, just like, should we eliminate some of these if we don't think we're going to do them anyway, so that people can plan it friendly?
Yeah. Well, I think facilities probably needs a
I'm
look.
thinking
I don't
much,
think you need
I'm thinking less about us and more about
I don't think you need a
the
monthly
people who
meeting.
have to be at every meeting. 73 is a lot.
The reason we've kept sort of a monthly cadence is that then there's a placeholder. And so if facilities needs to meet, that committee's already reserved the time, but it can be canceled. For example.
And it doesn't have to be run as a special meeting.
Right.
Would
But
it make sense to ask each committee to have that as an agenda item in September? Like, let's look at the schedule and what
Sure.
we're talking about trying to do. Do we
Sure.
need all of these
Yeah.
dates?
Sure.
If each committee just addresses it, maybe
Sure.
there'll be a few we could
good idea.
release.
Good idea. Katie?
I'm sorry, which two did you say that might be combined?
Well, the board would need to discuss, but
Yes.
communications and policy, we debated when we constituted it, whether or not communications would be part of policy to begin with. We decided to separate it out because of the level of work. But given that policy is near the end of its audit and communications is coming, you know, to a close on the big lift.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
wanted to confirm. And then on the regular Board of Education meetings, this has November 5th as an organizational meeting, but I believe that is election day.
Not, you're looking 25. This is 25.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Okay. With that, may I have a motion? No, I have a motion already. All those in favor? Okay.
Aye.
All right. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay. Personnel report, March.
I mean, even though Shirley will tell me that self-praise is no praise, I think that if you look at this, we've done a really great job of hiring at all points in the salary schedule, from the lower steps to the highest steps, even in shortage areas. So hopefully I'm not jinxing myself going forward, and we have had a couple of resignations. These resignations are mostly for people who are moving out of the area, a few of them who are moving south to make a lot more money.
Not South Connecticut, but south of the.
Greenwich, Westchester.
Oh, okay. March, how many openings do we have right now?
I mean, we have a few, but we're in very good shape compared to, we just, yeah, but okay, it's not just special ed. It's everything. So we do have some people who are resigning as we speak, so,
Okay.
but we're well under 10, right?
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay. Do we have any follow-up action items, Dr. Abbott?
Well, this would typically be, maybe pick the wrong meeting to actually rule this out, but for you to tell us as to like, okay, like the administration, these are the things, the follow-up action items. This is the sort of like potential modification to the agenda. Is there any follow-up action items that you would want us to follow up with the board or otherwise?
Okay. Well, we do have a few things. We have Rich's
Yep.
project. I think
Yep.
I think it's public comment next, Shirley. That's what's going on. And then we have a couple of board member follow-ups, I think. We
Right.
have more follow-ups than not. So Greg and
Dennis, and then.
yes, so you have the student achievement goal and the KPIs goal. You have a couple for communications.
Robin and I are gonna, I think, talk about website with Dr.
Yeah.
Hadley. Weren't we talking about things we might be able to do in the near term that
Yeah.
might help?
That was like board stuff, right?
Yeah.
Board,
Yeah.
access.
And I was just gonna say, it might be helpful as an action item to ask for a reminder to be sent so that people
Okay.
don't miss
Yep,
their.
yep.
On
And
the device policy, just to give follow-up on that, I don't know, Ellen, if you want to circulate a Word version of that or how you want us to
I'll circulate some points.
Okay, Katie, you're working on the handbook and orientation. Okay. Dennis, we already have you with Greg. John, I think you're good. Robin, we got. Okay, and then, and like I said, Rich has his project.
Which
and then
project?
Rich's project is the athletic stuff.
Oh,
And then Shirley, you're following up with us on some of the transition numbers. Okay, did I miss anything? All right. Thank you, guys. Okay, public comment. Yeah, come on up. Cass, you want to speak?
Yes, sorry about that. Good afternoon. If anybody in person would like to participate in public comment or online, please come up to the podium or wait to be recognized. Please state your name and address for the record, and you will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Please note the time with the chair.
Hi, I'm Ansley Walker. I live at 137 Hollow Tree Ridge Road, apartment 121 here in Darien. And I serve as one of the priests over at St. Luke's Episcopal Church here in Darien. And I know I'm a little late to the party, but I came to express my support for the Away for the Day initiative. I've spent the last 10 years working with young people from preschool all the way through high school. Most of that time has been concentrated with middle and high school students. I've taught and coached in public schools, churches, and other organizations. And currently I work with 6th through 12th graders at our church. And in these 10 years, I've witnessed a profound change in the students that I serve. A change that frankly worries me for our future. They lack communication skills. They don't know how to build community with each other, to talk to their peers or to talk to their teachers, their mentors, or others. I am sure that the pandemic escalated this phenomenon, but I think we were already trending there when we started raising iPad or a YouTube generation. On Wednesday evenings here in Darien, nearly 70 middle schoolers gather for our confirmations class. I request that phones are out of sight during this time, and I've noticed that the kids who obey this are talking to each other. They're talking to the adult volunteers, they're engaging in their work. Most importantly, they're present in the moment. Now it pains me to see that the students who struggle to be without their phone, so they pull it out to use, and consequently, they miss out on what is right in front of them. I'm a young millennial, so I grew up with a cell phone in middle school and a smartphone in high school. Yet our phones were restricted to our locker during the day. If you took it out during class, it was confiscated for your parent to come pick up. And I am frankly grateful for that experience. What a gift we could give this generation to require their phones to be away for the day. They'll not only survive, but we will help them thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ainsley. Thanks for staying.
I believe Mr. Clark wants to address the public comment. Please state your name and address for the record and note that you'll have up to 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Bruce Clark. I am a 29-year teacher at the high school. I teach history and social studies, including AP US history, American history, government, and philosophy classes. I wasn't sure I'd be able to be called on here or to make it, so I wrote out what I wanted to say. Let me read that. Some students are leaders and some are followers, and that's pretty normal. But based upon a recent experience in my classroom, leaders among the students at Darien High School, when presented with the facts, would vote to ban cell phones in the high school. Most followers will also follow that opinion, I believe. This is because of a student-centered activity in my law and government class in which a single student was a senior leader who proposed banning cell phones. This was part of a Model Congress role play exercise. This exercise asked students to write an original and research-based bill, a proposed law. This is a requirement an assignment like this is a requirement in our government classes for all of our students. Some students do a model jury trial. I choose a model Congress. The bill has citations. It's based on research. One student wrote a bill I'd never seen in all the years of my doing this assignment. When I saw the bill, I figured this one would not pass when it comes before the entire class. Her bill proposed having students put their cell phones in pouches, i.e. yonder type pouches from bell to bell. She presented the bill to a small committee of 4 students. I divide the class up into 4 or 5 committees, 6 committees, depending on numbers. And this committee voted on her bill with a resounding unanimous vote. Yes. At our next class meeting, she made an extemporaneous speech in defense of her bill, fielded questions, and debated and answered every question. An amendment of clarification was added by the students according to Robert's rules, which I teach in my class. After about 25-30 minutes of discussion and debate, the students considered the bill. The students passed the bill by a roughly 3-to-1 margin. This was not an AP class, but a cross-section of Darien students. This one student, a quiet but smart, kind student, can see what's going on. She led most of the class to a decision on this cell phone topic. So we can lead or we can follow, but we should know that most of our students do know what's good for them. I and a handful of other teachers do ban cell phones in the classroom. It's a struggle. Many teachers, don't want the hassle of enforcing it. And I understand that because I've avoided that in the past at times. However, I have found that benefits do outstrip the policy. One chief benefit is that students are unable to coordinate meetings to go into the bathroom where other things happen. Overall, they're far more focused on what's going on in the classroom.
Mr. Clark, you're at time. If you don't mind just wrapping up, please.
Yes. Okay. So we as adults with our mature frontal cortexes to manage the stress of constant notifications, we struggle. But these Darien students have added up the facts from a fellow student and reached a reasonable conclusion. Student leaders are asking us to pass a similar policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If anybody else online would like to participate, please use the raised hand icon. We have no raised hands at this time.
Okay. With that, may I please have, well, before we go into executive session, thank you to all the members of the public who attended any or all of this. And certainly thank you to all of everybody here who just has another 2 hours. We have a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of interviewing candidates for the positions of A, Middlesex Middle School Principal, Middlesex Middle School Assistant Principal, and Darien High School Assistant Principals pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 1206A, and B, discussion of the superintendent's contract pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 1206A. That is Julie, seconded by Dennis. All those in favor? That is unanimous. I'd love to take just 5. Okay, but literally 5.
Am I gonna help?
You're leaving. Okay. All right, so 403.
You have 5.
405.
No, I'm sorry, you have 5. To finish the meeting, even if they.
Oh, even if Dave's not on. Yeah. Wait. Okay.
There's 5 of us, even if they didn't stick.
4, 5, 6. Where's 6?
So that.
1 second.
5.
Give me 1 second. I don't know what I'm doing. Give me 1 second. Sorry.
Set no.
I've got it. I'll do that, Dr. Adley.
People have been going for 7 hours.